welcome to Out of the Box Radio with me, your host, Christine Blosdale. Out of the Box Radio is a weekly podcast of audible ear candy dedicated to bringing a fresh perspective on this thing that we call life. And each and every week, we're going to be diving into the topics that matter most with lively conversations on issues such as health, wellness, and transformational healing, all with the goal of creating a better world and becoming a happier human being. I will be your tour guide for this epic adventure, and each and every week, we're going to be embarking on a journey with the ultimate goal being transformation to our highest potential. And now, let's get out of the box. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Out of the Box Radio. I am your host, Christine Blosdale, and I am so happy that you tuned in today because we have a very, very special program for you. As you know, with Out of the Box Radio, my whole goal is to bring to you people who are doing something unique, something wonderful for the planet. We showcase a lot of different people who have products, services, who are doing something great for the world, and today is no exception. I am very, very happy to have on the program HG Tudor. Now, HG Tudor is a narcissistic sociopath. Yes, I said that. It's true. Who, as part of his growing awareness and treatment, has been writing about how he and his kind behave and what goes through their minds in order to provide people with insight and enlightenment. He shares his observations and his ongoing situation through his platform, Knowing the Narcissist, which is a daily blog available on Twitter and Facebook, along with many, many books that are extremely popular, covering a wide spectrum of behaviors and how to deal with them. He lives and works in the United Kingdom, and as a consequence of the sensitivity of his professional position, he must maintain a veil over his identity, which we'll respect during this interview. And I want to say, HG, that I stumbled upon you on Facebook, and I was both repulsed and excited when I saw the blog, and I was shocked at how many people had responded to your blog entries and how popular you are. But I'm so happy that you're here on Out of the Box Radio. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us.
You're very welcome. I'm delighted to be here.
Now, the first question is, I get, you know, this whole thing reminds me sort of like the magicians who tell the public how you saw the woman in half, you know, like I'm sure there's other narcissistic sociopaths out there who are like, hey, HG, what are you doing? Talk, if you don't mind, a little bit about the birth of this. When did you decide to sort of come out of not the closet, but come out of hiding, so to speak?
There were sort of two rationales behind that. The first was allied to the fact that I really enjoy writing, and I have always engaged in doing that. And I used to write a little bit about some of the things that had happened to me and some of the things that I did purely for private consumption. And then as a consequence of the desires of my family, it was necessary for me to engage in a course of treatment. And arising out of that, the discussions that I had with the two doctors that were engaged in that treatment was the suggestion that because of how articulate I am and because of my love of writing, that it would be beneficial for me to engage in doing further writing, but to put it on a platform to enable others to interact with me. It wasn't done from the perspective of necessarily wanting to help other people, more a case of putting the information out there and allowing people to decide for themselves how they might use it. And it's interesting how you mentioned, Christine, at the outset, how you were both repulsed and excited when you first saw it, because that is generally the reaction that tends to engender. There is this, I can't believe I'm actually reading what's being written here. Yeah. Quite astonishing, but also, isn't it fascinating?
Yes, well, and it's a radio producer's dream come true, because you're allowing people into the mind of now, you know, of a narcissist. And now, for people who don't understand, and I'm going to tell everybody, you have at one time or another come across someone with a narcissistic behavior or narcissistic personality. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter who you are. I know you said, no, not me. Yes, you've come across one, or you might be one yourself. Now, for our audience who are not maybe completely up with the language, if you don't mind, can you explain what a narcissist is? And are there different kinds, different levels?
There are. Everybody has narcissistic traits. You have them. I certainly have them. Everybody listening to this will have them to a greater or lesser extent. Everybody's born with those narcissistic traits because as a baby, then a toddler and a child, it's a simple case of feed me, care for me, keep me warm, entertain me, very inward looking. And then over time, as the way that people develop, they will realize, or most of them do, that in order to get on with the world, one has to engage and interact with people on a give and take basis. And that will ultimately influence the extent of the traits that they have, along with some other factors which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit later, which are more related to trauma and so on. Anyway, in terms of what is a narcissist, because everybody has these traits, you will know somebody who perhaps always likes to be the center of attention. But that in itself doesn't mean that they are a narcissist. It merely means that they have a narcissistic trait, one of which is perhaps grandiosity. In terms of if somebody's suffering from what is known as narcissistic personality disorder, they have to hit a number of criteria to a certain extent so that a diagnosis can be made. And some of those criteria include the fact that the individual is unable to empathize for other people, has a exaggerated sense of self, engages in, for example, magical thinking about how wonderful and brilliant that they are, that they have no sense of accountability or culpability for their actions, that they do not recognize boundaries, and so on and so forth. And a lot of narcissists are entirely unaware that they are one. And the way that I've talked about this is that they originate from three schools, if you will: the lesser, the mid-range, and the greater. And if you think of a spectrum, on your far left, you've got generally empathic individuals who are kind and caring, honest and decent, who have few narcissistic traits, but they'll have some. Move a little further to the right, and then you'll have, perhaps if you could call them normal people, not particularly empathic, but nowhere near narcissistic, but again, they have some traits. And then we move further to the right, and you start to engage with those who have narcissistic personality disorder, and those are what I call the lessers. They don't know what they are. And if you were to say to that person, you were a narcissist, they would completely deny it. And they would also react very badly to it. Move a little further to the right on this spectrum, you then have the mid-range. Those types of narcissists have an awareness that there's something not quite right about what they do. They have an awareness of certain needs, but they don't fully understand what they are. And then move further to the right, and you have the greater narcissist, which is on the scale of sociopathy, which is essentially whereby there is an awareness, it's calculated, there is scheming, there is plotting, and those narcissists are fully what they are. But whether they will admit that to anybody depends on whether it suits their purposes or not. So you have those three different schools, if you will, which are along the scale. And then within those schools, you have what I've called the cadres. And there are four of those: the victim, the somatic, the cerebral, and the elite. Briefly, the victim narcissist is somebody who is essentially looking for a mother figure. They're often a hypochondriac, or if they have a genuine illness, they'll play on it repeatedly. Typically, they will say, I have a bad back, or I suffer from depression, or a bad knee, often invisible illnesses, if you will. And they will look for somebody who is ultra caring, who isn't particularly interested in the fact that the narcissist isn't good looking or necessarily a high achiever, but will want to mother this individual. The somatic narcissist is obsessed with appearance, not only physically, but in terms of material appearance, drives a flashy car, lives in a large house, wears the latest designer gear. Cerebral is all about the intellect and showing off how clever the individual is. And an elite is a mixture of both the somatic and the cerebral. So you have 3 schools and 4 cadres, and narcissistic individuals are drawn from all of those.
Wow. Oh my God. Now, how does someone, because what I've noticed, and folks, if you've just tuned in, this is Out of the Box Radio, and I'm Christine Blosdale, and my wonderful guest is HG Tudor, who is a master narcissist. What do you prefer? What do you prefer to be called? A narcissistic sociopath?
You can call me that if you like, or
it sounds so it sounds so mean, but I just love your honesty.
That is the classification that was provided by, as I refer to them, as the good doctors. That's what they've told me. My position is, I refer to it more in terms of by making it more accessible for people to understand. I refer to it as a greater elite narcissist.
Of course you do.
Of course, but then of course people will say, well, you'd love that title, wouldn't you? And of course I do.
Yes, exactly. What I've noticed when I stumbled upon your page on Facebook, which is called Knowing the Narcissist, by the way, folks, you want to check it out, is so many women, I would say a majority of women, so many women were like, oh my God, thank you. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was jealous. I thought I was insecure. Well, because the narcissist that was in their life was telling them that, oh, you're just, insecure. That's from your childhood. So for people in the audience, can you maybe because maybe they're in a relationship with a narcissist and they don't know it. What are some keys? What are some things that they should be paying attention to see if they are indeed actually with a narcissist or someone who has narcissistic behaviors?
Certainly. The whole point of why we're able to do what we do is because you never see us coming. If you did, you would naturally run a mile. And this is what makes us so dangerous. If you were to ask anybody who you're walking past in the street, what do you understand by the word narcissist? I should imagine half the people would shrug and not understand the word. And then probably a good further 3/4 would say, well, that's somebody who loves themselves, isn't it? But they won't actually understand what a narcissist is, how they appear to a person, and what it is that they do. And this is why anybody who is entangled with our kind cannot actually believe what has happened to them. And it takes them such a long time to actually extract themselves from our grip. Now, many people, when they're first approached by us, we engage in the seduction stage. Very charming. We mirror your behavior. And the reason we mirror your behavior is because ultimately you are always looking for your other half. And that's why people talk about my other half, because you want to see yourself. I'm not talking about exactly the same, but you want to find somebody who has very similar interests to yourself, has similar moral outlooks, likes similar things to yourself. We mirror all of that. And so one of the first things whereby, as an indicator or a red flag, is if you're with somebody who just happens to like everything that you like and doesn't like everything you do not like, and it's astonishing how it just seems that you match on every single level, that is a warning sign. Now, the problem is, of course, for the individual, they will just think, isn't this marvelous? I've met this man and he's completely into horse racing like I am. He likes the same kind of music as I do. He likes eating Thai food. And you'll never believe what. He's also takes an interest in the works of the author Ian Banks. Now, the narcissist probably doesn't like any of that, but what he will have done beforehand, particularly if he's of the greater nature, he will have gone on the individual's social media and looked at what they post. And if he's noticed that that person talks a lot about liking to read Ian Banks, The Wasp Factory, for example, he will then proclaim that that's his favourite novel. And so he creates this match. And the problem is the individual will think to themselves, well, this is wonderful, and they won't see the danger sign, but it's a huge red flag. And there are so many of them that during the initial stage, for instance, we want to bind you very close to us. We want you giving all your attention to us because that provides us with fuel. Fuel, or narcissistic supply, is where you give us an emotional reaction. So all your admiration, your love, your happiness, your joy, your appreciation, from a smile to you saying that I love you, all of that provides us with fuel. And at the beginning, we want this positive fuel from you. So therefore, we're lovely to you. We make you fall in love with us. We're very charming, and we do it very quickly because we want to get hold of you as fast as we possibly can. We want to bind you close, and that's so your focus is on us all of the time and nobody else can intervene. So we will try and isolate you from anybody we see who is potentially somebody who will cause a problem, who might say, hang on a second, this guy's told you that he loves you after 3 dates. Don't you think that's rather quick?
Right.
If somebody's talking in such terms, we will say, well, they're jealous, aren't they? They haven't got what you and I have got in our relationship. You don't need to listen to what they've got to say. And I do love you, and it has happened so quickly, but then that's because I've met my soulmate. So there are a whole string of things that you would see early on. Lots of text messaging, bombarding you with text. So the first thing that you receive in the morning is a text where I've taken a quote from some love poem and applied it to you. I'll ring you during the day to let you know I'm thinking about you. I will send you gifts. I will take you to exciting places. And there will be this whole whirlwind of delight. But nobody will see the warning signs because it all feels fantastic.
Well, yeah.
It's not like, you see, the problem is people tend to think, me and my kind are abusers. Let's not beat around the bush about this. We're abusive individuals. We abuse the notion of love. And then later on during the devaluation, we do awful and horrible things to people because that is the way that we operate. Now, lots of people think, well, an abuser, he's bound to be somebody who turns up who's a bald-headed, knuckle-dragging, aggressive-looking individual. No, he's not. In the same way as a fraudster who wants to con people out of their money isn't some greasy-haired, shifty-looking spiv, but a very charming, plausible individual who is well-dressed and knows everything to say. You can't see us coming because we are in and around you all of the time. And as you pointed out earlier on, Christine, anybody listening to this will know a narcissist because we are everywhere. It's spotting them. That's the difficulty.
And that's the beauty of your blog that I've seen. Again, it's available. I know it's available on Twitter and Facebook. And yes. You had mentioned the seduction phase. Now, in a relationship or whatever it is, when you're involved with a narcissist, can you go through, because this is something that I think is vitally important for people, because the seduction phase, hey, anybody can get caught up in that. When somebody tells you you're the love of my life, oh my God, we have so many things that we like. We both hate country western music, whatever. Let's talk about the phases, because this is where people lose their mind, or they think that it's them. They get low self-esteem. They think they're told that they're insecure or jealous. But talk about, because this is where you also, as a narcissist, feed off of you gain the fuel from the emotional charge, the emotional energy. But please talk about the next phase after seduction. What happens after that?
Following the seduction, we move into devaluation. So if you imagine I put you up on that pillar, I've made you feel like a queen, like a princess, and then all of a sudden you're thrown from that pedestal down into the dirt. And it's a very confusing experience for the victim. It's often done in an insidious fashion, a salami slicing approach through a huge range of manipulative techniques that we deploy. And many of those, for example, and you touched on them, is to suggest that it's the other person that has the problem, not us. We enjoy blame shifting. We enjoy projecting our issues onto the other person. We engage in what's known as gaslighting. So we try and alter your reality, so you start to question yourself. And what we want you to do is to be engulfed with doubt and emotion. Because if we keep you in that place, you can't think straight and you'll make bad decisions. Emotional decisions are bad decisions. We operate through cool, hard logic. You are caught in an emotional maelstrom when you're ensnared by our type. And what makes it worse, of course, is that for a number of months, maybe a year or two, the golden period, as I call it, this is the period of seduction, everything was wonderful. You've not met anybody like this before. It was the love of your life, and then all of a sudden it goes wrong and you can't understand why. So your initial reaction is to think, I must have done something to cause this. Now the narcissist knows that you're mired in this doubt and will just keep exploiting that. And you, rather than realizing this is a disordered individual I'm dealing with, who 1 minute is all right with me and then the next is unpleasant to me, that can't be right, I'm walking away. That is how somebody would regard it with cool logic. But you don't. You think, why are they behaving like this with me? What have I done wrong? I want to make them happy. I want to get back to the golden period. So they will try even harder and they will stay linked to the narcissist. And the narcissist will just exploit this. So they will create upset and frustration and anger and fear, because all of those are negative emotions. And this is one of the strangest things that people find about our kind, is that even if you're shouting and screaming at me, that to me is fine. You can call me all the names under the sun. That doesn't matter, so long as you're doing it with tears trickling down your face or with your mouth twisted in anger, because you're providing me with fuel. And so long as I'm getting that reaction, I'm perfectly content with that. And a normal person would be, what are you shouting at me for? I don't like it, and walk away. But to me, that isn't an issue.
Now, talk about, do most narcissists have several feeding opportunities at the same time? Because this is something that I have noticed with friends of mine who, and they have all said, they just thought that their partner was a cheater. And they said, yes, this person is just cannot be faithful, cheated on me. And they go away from that relationship angry at the person for that, but they don't realize how they've been manipulated. Now, talk about the multiple relationships that a narcissist will have, or the multiple connections that they will have, the opportunities for feeding not just that one person.
Yes. The situation is that with a narcissist, they need fuel from lots of different sources. And one can divide it into essentially 3 categories. There are primary sources, which is invariably your intimate partner. Not always, but most of the time it is. You then have secondary sources of fuel, friends, family, colleagues, and then tertiary sources of fuel, strangers, remote strangers, minions. So, for example, the guy who serves you your coffee in the coffee shop down the road would be referred to as a minion. A stranger would be somebody you get in a lift with who turns and smiles at you. All of those categories of people are regarded as appliances by our kind. We don't regard people as individuals because we merely see them as extensions of ourselves, because they are there to do what we want. And there are essentially 3 things that we require these people to do. The first and foremost is to give us fuel. The second is to provide us with character traits, which I'll return to later. And the third is residual benefits, which is basically that person might provide a roof over my head for me, they may lend me money, they may give me a lift, etc., etc. But in terms of fuel, if, for example, I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I do is reach for my mobile phone, and there is a text message there from somebody I was flirting with the previous evening, their message may say, "Missing you already, HG, can't wait to talk to you again." that provides me with fuel. Now, you might ask, well, where is the emotion in that? Well, I know there's emotion in that because I know that the person has written it from a position of admiration and longing. So that creates fuel for me. I then get out of my bed, and let's say that there's a person I'm living with. They've been up before me, and they come in and they bring me a cup of tea and wish me good morning. That gives me fuel because they're doing something pleasant for me. The gesture of making a cup of tea for me is a loving and kind gesture. I then receive a telephone call from a friend who wants to congratulate me on the deal that I closed yesterday. That admiration gives me fuel. I get in my car and I drive to work and I cut up somebody, and the chap in the next car to me flips me the bird and calls me all the names under the sun. That's negative fuel for me because he's angry with me. And all throughout the day, I will draw in this fuel from everybody around me, whether it's a smile, a look of appreciation, a look of anger, somebody kissing me, somebody patting me on the back. And it comes from all different sources. And the potency of that fuel varies dependent on who's providing it. And a person who is a minion, who might wish me a good day as he hands me my cup of coffee, that just gives me a small amount of fuel. Whereas my intimate partner coming in and hugging me and kissing me and telling me that they love me gives me a huge amount of fuel. And therefore, often the narcissist will want to draw fuel from lots of different sources. And that's why infidelity happens very frequently, because there is a need to draw it from the primary source. This is the intimate partner, the spouse, the girlfriend, the boyfriend. But at the same time, we may as well take it from somebody else and take it from somebody who we're having an affair with, because this enables us to triangulate those two individuals as well. And in those instances, if, for example, our partner has suspicions that we're playing away, they will get angry and upset about it. So we receive negative fuel from that person. And then on the other hand, the person we're having an affair with is loving and admirable. We get positive fuel from them. And if you imagine all through the day, we're looking to top up with this fuel from anybody and everybody.
If you don't mind, because the triangulation is, I think, one of the more, I don't want to say fascinating, but I understand the drawing of the fuel, because in the triangulation, all of the parties, other than the narcissist, all of the parties don't know what's going on. But can you talk about what a master narcissist does with triangulation and how it affects the different people involved?
Certainly. I will triangulate a victim with another person, or with another person who doesn't even exist, or even with an inanimate object. By way of example, let us say I am in a relationship with somebody, and what I will do is I will keep mentioning somebody else's name. Let's call this individual Anne. And I will keep saying, oh, Anne did very well at work today, and she looked particularly nice. My partner will say, after a while of hearing me keep mentioning Anne, you talk about Anne a lot. My immediate reaction to that will be, I'm not allowed to talk about a colleague, am I? My partner will perhaps then respond by, no, I wasn't suggesting that. And I will then go on the offensive because I know that they're suspicious and I sense an opportunity to get more fuel out of them. So I'll say, well, no, what are you accusing me of? Actually, I'm sick of you accusing me of things. I work bloody hard, you know. And I go there, and Anne's a very good colleague of mine, and she's very supportive of this new project. And you're getting jealous. I can't stand your jealousy. Is it any wonder that other people are interested in me when you treat me like this? And you find that you've just made a relatively innocuous remark about the fact that I mention Anne quite often, and I've turned it into a full-blown argument because I triangulated you with Anne to get you to be either upset or angry with me.
And you threw the blame onto the victim.
Exactly.
Okay.
We are utterly unaccountable at all times. With a lesser narcissist, it's a knee-jerk reaction, it's instinctive. So, for example, if you were to say to a lesser narcissist, I know what you are, I think you're a conniving and manipulative individual, the lesser narcissist, being a lower functioning individual, will probably turn around and immediately go, what are you using dictionary words for with me? Why are you trying to make me look stupid? And that will be their instinctive reaction,
Right.
because they regard it as criticism. I know exactly why they're saying what they're saying, and they're right in what they're saying, but I will still not let them accept that I will still not allow them to be right, because at all times I have to assert I'm in control. I'm the superior one. They're the inferior one. I am not done too.
Let's go further into the triangulation. Let's say, as a master narcissist, you have one person that you are maybe in a relationship with, or the person believes that they're in a relationship with you, one-on-one, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not getting the fuel, that initial charge that it's in the devaluation stage. How's that? We're in the devaluation stage of your primary source of fuel, because you're still hooked in, because you know that person loves you or whatever,
Yes.
is connected to you. Now you bring in another person who is attracted to you. In the triangulation, from what I've read in the blog entries, one of the things that master narcissists do is they play one upon each other. So, in other words, to the person that they're in the relationship with, again, like you said, mention the other person, bring them up in conversation, so that in the victim's mind, the primary victim's mind, there's this person that, do I have to worry about this person? I don't know. And then this is what's amazing to me.
Mm-hmm.
In the master narcissist triangulation formula, the other person, the new person, who is all excited about meeting you, doesn't know, it's the beginnings of the throes of excitement.
Yes.
You will tell that person how the other one is jealous or insecure, or
Yes.
Right? You'll talk bad about the other person with the new feeding source. Is that correct?
That's right. And we will vacillate between those two positions on a regular basis, perhaps within minutes. So, for example, if I was in a relationship with person A and we are in the devaluation, now understand, in the devaluation, it is not a case of each and every day meting out horrible treatment against this person. There are periods of respite, which is an intentional act to keep them hooked on us. So it's a little bit, if you like, dealing with a drug addict and not allowing them to have any drugs for 5 days, and on the 6th day giving them some.
Perfect analogy. Okay.
Indeed. Now, with person B, they may know that I'm in a relationship, but I tell them, it's the classic, my wife doesn't understand me, or my wife never lets me do anything, or my wife doesn't let me have any friends, or she doesn't listen to me. But you new person B, you're wonderful, and you listen to me, and I've never met anybody like this before, and it's absolutely wonderful, and thank goodness you've come along. So they feel special. And because people invariably take people at face value, person B will accept everything that I'm saying and will think, well, here's this man who treats me wonderfully, and isn't it awful that he's been trapped by this horrible wife who doesn't let him do anything?
Yes.
I want him for myself. So I will do everything I can to pull him away. And then, after a period of time, I decide that person B is starting to not give me the fuel that I want. So I will return to person A and say, there is this lady at work, she will not leave me alone. She's stalking me, she's crazy. She might get in touch with you and suggest that there's something going on between me and her. Don't listen to anything that she says. I'm letting you know this because I love you. It's you that I'm married to, and I want to be with you. So then person A thinks to themselves, well, thank goodness he still wants me. I've been worrying about that because things haven't been going too well between us as of late. And in a way, he is a handsome guy and very popular, so it's understandable that somebody else might be interested in him. But thank goodness he's warned me about this crazy woman. And then, of course, we just basically stand back and let the two of you fight it out between yourselves. And what you end up doing is you're too busy trying to get one over on the other person because you don't want to lose us. Whereas if you were able to make a cool and logical assessment of the situation, you would both sit down and say, wait a second, he said this to you. He said exactly the same thing to me. Do you know he said this about you? Hang on a second. he said that about you as well. What's going on? But you never get to that point until perhaps much, much later when the damage has been done, because you are both fighting over this wonderful person, this illusion that you think makes you happy, and you want it and you don't want the other person to have it.
Wow. Listen to that laugh. HG. Folks, if you're just tuning in, that evil laugh is that of HG Tudor, who is a master narcissist and creator of a fantastic blog that you can access on Facebook. It's called Knowing the Narcissist, and it's like I said, go there and read some of the blog entries. Also, HG, you have, brilliantly so too, you have self-published quite a bit of your books. If people are interested in that, just give them let them know how they can get a hold of some of the books.
All the books are available on Amazon. At the moment, they're all electronic downloads, but there are plans in the next fortnight for the most popular ones to be brought out as paperbacks. What I've done there is, as I mentioned at the outset of our conversation, Christine, is that I do enjoy writing. And what I'm doing is telling you what it all is all about from our perspective. And there are books which touch on a variety of different subjects. So there's one that's called Fuel, which enables you to understand why essentially we do everything that we do. There's one called Fury, which explains why it seems that we're permanently angry under the surface and what drives that. And there are also books that have been written from the perspective of enabling you to identify the forms of manipulations that are used against you. That's Manipulated in the Devil's Toolkit. And then also there are books which have been written to enable you to do something about it, such as Escape and No Contact and Departure Imminent, to name but a few. And the huge advantage that people have is that the subject of narcissism is naturally a fascinating one. And many of the books that are out there are written from the perspective of victims, which is entirely valid and provides that perspective from people who've understood what's happened to them. And there's a lot of value in those books because naturally it's written by somebody who's experienced it. But there are still questions that remain unanswered because they are not narcissists. There are then other categories of books which are written by people who have studied narcissism but have never experienced it. And again, there's value in what is written there. But often that's detailed in quite a scientific way, which is quite difficult for people to access and is quite difficult for them to link to their own experience. And then I've come along, and what I've done is explain, this is what I do, and this is why we do it. And I do it using terminology that's not scientific, because I am not a scientist. And couched in those terms, it enables people to actually understand why things have been done, why things have been said, and it makes it as clear as day. Because one of the most important things for people is that they must understand that we regard everything from a different perspective to them. One of the most frustrating things for people that deal with us is, how can he not see what he is doing is wrong? I've just explained it to him, I've put the evidence in front of him, and he still will not accept it. That is because you're looking at it from your perspective. We look at it from a different perspective. So to give you an example of that, a victim may well say, this is the third time this week that you've come in the early hours. I've kept a note in this book of when you've come in. Look, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 2:30 a.m., and each time you've come in smelling of drink and perfume. What's going on? So from your perspective, you're thinking, there is the evidence that this person has come in late. There is evidence of drinking and fraternizing with the other sex. It all points in one direction. From our perspective, when you say all of that to us, we're not seeing the evidence. All we hear is a criticism. And all we hear is you saying to us, you've done something that you shouldn't be doing. And because we don't recognize boundaries and we have a huge sense of entitlement, we believe we're entitled to do what we want, when we want, and where we want.
Oh, I'm so glad that the work that you're doing on the blogs, I'm really excited that it's going to be eventually into a book form, because you are a wonderful writer as well, HG.
Thank you.
I mean, I think what you're doing is extremely valuable for people. I know it's extremely valuable for your own processing and your own healing as well.
That's
But
right.
I think it's so valuable, and I can't wait to have it be paperback. Because I like books. I like the paper. I like to bring the book to into bed. I don't like to read on the screen so much, because I'm always looking at the screen. I'm always on the computer or social media. And that was going to my next question.
Yes.
For the narcissist, master narcissist, whatever level narcissist someone is, let's talk about the feeding frenzy. It's like chum going out to a shark, pool of social media. Do talk about that, because in general, social media is an instant gratification for the ego. If you post a picture and you look handsome or beautiful, you'll get people saying, "Oh, you're hot, you're cute, you're blah 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 blah." That's instant gratification. Now, for a person with normal behaviors of, yes, there's ego involved and there is narcissistic traits that we all have. Yes. But talk about what that does, or how narcissists use social media in order to get more of that fuel.
In the same way that when the Romans built the roads, they had no idea that cars would come along them later on. The early pioneers of social media had no idea of the formidable instrument that they were creating for the likes of us. Social media is a playground for our type. It allows us to reach, manipulate, influence on a scale never before. I, of course, remember a period of time, given my age, prior to the existence of the internet and text messaging and so on. And if I compare back then in terms of getting fuel as to how I do it now, it is far, far easier. Social media allows me, when I'm targeting an individual, to find out so much about them so that I can then use that information to ensure that my seduction of them is successful. I mentioned earlier on in the conversation about how there will be a trawl of that person's online presence. So information can be gained in that sense. Social media allows me not just to put out, if you like, one fishing line to get a bite. I can put out thousands. And therefore that increases the chances of getting somebody hooked. And then once they are interested, social media allows me to undertake the love bombing that is a key component of the seduction. So I can send them a message on Facebook Messenger. I can tweet something to them. I can use it to keep tabs on when they've been on social media. I can keep liking all of their posts. I can like all of their pictures so that I am in and around them at all times. And then, of course, when the devaluation starts, I take it all away. They suddenly find themselves blocked, only for a couple of hours to begin with. Again, remember the salami slicing approach. So I'll block them across all my social media, and then I'll allow them back in. They're thinking to themselves, should I raise that with HG, or does it make me look like I'm insecure? I know exactly what you're thinking because I've done it on purpose. It's done to unsettle and unnerve. It allows me to find additional sources of fuel while I'm in a relationship. It allows me to interact with people. It allows me to instigate smear campaigns against people when I'm about to cast them to one side. Social media is the narcissist's best friend.
Wow. So Facebook is your BFF?
Very much. No, you are, Christine.
Oh, you're good. You are good, my friend. Wow. Yes. Well, and also you're gaining the fuel from the person who's been blocked, or let's say all of a sudden you're not liking their post anymore. And so they're sitting there going, how come he's not commenting on my how come he's commenting on other people's pictures, but not mine anymore? I thought I see what you're doing. So you're getting that fuel as well.
Very much so. As I pointed out earlier on, this is one of the peculiarities and perhaps one of the most insidious elements of it, is that I don't actually have to see you react to gain fuel. If I know that I've blocked you because I know you, I know that you'll be sat saying the things you've just mentioned there, and you'll be worrying, you'll be upset, you'll be frustrated. And that will provide me with negative fuel. Even though I can't see it or hear it, I know about it. And if you like, it is akin to the puppet master sitting there, knowing that if he does this on the left-hand side, somewhere over there is a reaction. And if he does this on the right-hand side, there'll be a reaction maybe hundreds of miles away, but there's still a reaction. And that fuels our sense of omnipotence, because we believe in the construct that we create in our minds, that we are this all-conquering, powerful individual who is able to move people around like chess pieces on a chessboard, that they are actors on a stage doing what we want. And social media is a fantastic way of enabling us to do that.
And whereas, like, if someone like myself who's in a relationship with someone and I have my cell phone and they say, hey, can I make, I need to make a call, I need to call my mom or whatever, I have no problem handing over my phone to them and letting them make a call, letting them go through, they can even go through my phone because I don't have anything to hide. Now, with you, if, let's say, someone that you're in a relationship with or someone that even you are, courting, if they picked up your phone, HG, what would you do?
They wouldn't get near it to begin with. It's as simple as that. And it's not the fact that there's one phone. There are 3 phones, but there are 2 they don't know about.
Ah. And then there's a password to get in? Always.
And of course, I am entitled to go everywhere on your phone, your PC, your laptop, because I am entitled. However, demonstrating the legendary hypocrisy for which we're known, if you then say to me, well, you're able to look at my phone, and so can't I look at yours? I will deny you that access. And I will quite readily explain, well, no, you can't. There's sensitive work information on there. That's probably a lie, but that is done to deflect you from wanting to look at it. And if you persist, I will turn it around with the typical blame shifting to say, why are you trying to control me? You're always wanting to look at my phone. Don't you trust me? What's the problem?
Me?
I hate it when you behave like this. And then I'll decide that I'll storm out of the room and mete out a silent treatment to you for a few hours. So you will feel upset and you will lose sight of the fact that you wanted to look at my phone, and you'll focus instead on the fact that I'm not talking to you.
What I'm understanding is that in addition to the need for the fuel, narcissists are brilliant liars.
Yes.
Like, it's not a matter of the narcissist believing their lie. It's they know that they're lying, but it's for a greater cause. It's almost like it's okay for me to lie because I need this fuel source, or I don't want to talk to them about this, right?
Exactly.
It's all, what is the word that I'm trying to,
well, I always look at it in terms of the end always justifies the means.
Yes.
So, interestingly, in terms of telling lies, the lesser doesn't think that they are telling lies. They believe what they're saying because it is an instinctive and knee-jerk reaction. And even if they were to say, that orange over there is black, and you were to say, no, it's orange, and then a minute later, the listener will say, well, actually, it's white, and you would say, you said it was black a minute ago. They won't focus on that difference of what they've just said. They'll focus on the fact that you're trying to make them look stupid and go on the attack, so that the lie that they've told is forgotten about. And people find that very strange to deal with, but it is that instinctive reaction. From my perspective, I know that I tell lies because I see them as self-serving in order to get what I need, which is fuel. And in certain instances, because I have spent a lifetime of telling these lies, they become a truth to me. But it has been as a consequence of the work that I've been doing with the good doctors, whereby it's increased my awareness that you understand the purpose of and the nature of the repeated and pathological lying that we engage in.
Ultimately, I would think that the life of a narcissist, although it's very busy,
Yeah.
And you're surrounded by a lot of admirers and people who want to be with you. I would venture to say it must be lonely. Or maybe not to the narcissist, but to me, from an outsider's perspective, it seems like a quite alone. And I know you build up walls. I know that you build up protection so that no one can come in. But at the same time, it must be lonely.
I think, and again, this is something that has been approached in terms of my growing awareness, is the fact that you're surrounded by people because you need to be surrounded by people to get fuel from them, but you do not allow them anywhere near to what you actually think and feel vis-a-vis ourselves. Again, with a lesser individual, there is this instinctive barrier that is put up to stop people getting close to them. I don't want people knowing, if you like, my inner sanctum. I don't want to admit them there, because what I have put there, I don't want to contemplate. I don't want to allow it to see the light of day. And if I won't allow it, I'm certainly not allowing anybody else to come close to it. And that is why we build these barriers. Part of it is to keep what's in so that it stays in, and a lot of it is to ensure that you are kept out. So whilst I will interact with you on lots of different levels in order to get my fuel, I'm not allowing you inside my inner sanctum.
I think a question that is on a lot of people's mind is this something that developed from something that happened during childhood, or is a narcissist born a narcissist, or a master narcissist born a master narcissist, or does one become one due to life's circumstances and effects of others' treatment of them?
Through my ongoing journey, I've noticed that there are different opinions with regard to this. Although there does seem to be a greater preponderance to the belief that the creation of the narcissist originates from events in childhood, and it's either as a consequence of being neglected as a child or treated as the golden child. And where it's an instance of having been neglected, the child isn't given the love and the affection that he or she wants, and therefore creates this new personality in order to make people like them. That's putting it very simply. By the same token, the child that has been treated in a sense as being the golden child has this huge sense of entitlement, has always been allowed to do what it wants and get its way, and in the same token then hasn't understood and developed certain core emotions in terms of understanding what proper love is about, what real joy is, what real happiness is. Those are emotions which are alien to me. What I feel is power that comes from the fuel. That's the main positive emotion that I experience. I tell people that I experience love, but it's not the love that you will feel. It's something completely different, because what I have experienced, and this is what is coming out of what I'm understanding with my work with good doctors, is that what I experienced as love when I was a child was nothing like what real love is. And I have a twisted and malevolent view of what that is because of the way that I was treated as a child. And my narcissism is a reaction to all of that. Essentially, you're regarded as, in terms of your development and your emotions, it's become arrested somewhere around the age of 8 or 9 or 10 years old. I am at present writing about this process of what happened to me as a child and how that has come to bear on what I am now, because I'm starting to understand and learn the connection, and that's forming part of a book which I don't know when it will be available, probably later this year. But it's a very difficult process to write about it, because I'm being asked to confront something that I don't want to confront.
I think it's absolutely imperative that not only for your own well-being and health and healing, that you do go into that journey. Although with what you've done with the blog and on Facebook, I think your redemption is right around the corner, because it is so valuable to people. And even your interview with me today, I know that it's maybe even perhaps stepping out of your comfort zone. I didn't provide you with a list of questions. I didn't. I said this is going to be free flowing, and so that we both are going on this journey. And I think that what you're doing with this is absolutely vitally important, not only for others but as well for yourself. And I just want to thank you so much, HG, for doing this today. And can we have you back on again another time?
Well, naturally, I love having an audience. So, of course, there are many, even though we've spoken for about an hour, there is so much more that can be discussed. It touches so many areas of people's lives, and there are so many facets to it that we've only really scratched the surface in our conversation today. So I would be delighted to come back on again. It would be very kind of you to invite me to do so.
Oh, I am definitely planning on it, because there's so much that we can explore. Folks, my guest this hour has been HG Tudor, a Master Narcissist. And the blog that you can check out on Facebook and Twitter is called Knowing the Narcissist. And I am so excited. Okay, I definitely want you back. Well, before the book is published, but especially when the book is published. Wow, I am just so excited that you have come on to Out of the Box Radio. Thank you so much, HG. I really appreciate it. And our audience, and I know our audience does too.
You're welcome.
And folks, also, if you would like to share this interview, because I know you will want to, if maybe you know someone who is in a relationship with a narcissist, or who maybe you suspect has narcissistic behaviors as well, please check out the YouTube video that'll be posted. This program will also be archived on iTunes, and you can share it on social media that way. I want to thank you so much for listening. Thanks again to HG Tudor. Go check him out at Knowing the Narcissist. Also, HG, you have a website as well, correct?
Yes, that's the blog, which is narcsite.wordpress.com, and that's where you can read the articles there, which are then sent also to Facebook and to Twitter. But on the blog, I must say that there is a lively arena of debate there, with some very interesting people who approach their interaction with me in a respectful manner, and who are wanting to learn and understand what has happened to them, and to learn and understand what it is about my kind that makes us do as we do. And I'd encourage people to join that debate, because there's some very articulate and eloquent people there who have some excellent opinions and views of themselves, though almost as good as mine.
Oh, you are so charming. It's so fun. Again, thank you so much, HG. And you are now in the inner sanctum of Out of the Box Radio, and I know that our listeners are going to be flocking to your blog, and we're going to have you back again real soon. I promise.
I look forward to that.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And also, don't forget to tune in next week for another edition of Out of the Box Radio. Until then, always think outside of the box. Welcome to Out of the Box Radio with me, your host, Christine Blosdale. Out of the Box Radio is a weekly podcast of audible ear candy dedicated to bringing a fresh perspective on this thing that we call life. And each and every week, we're going to be diving into the topics that matter most with lively conversations on issues such as health, wellness, and transformational healing, all with the goal of creating a better world and becoming a happier human being. I will be your tour guide for this epic adventure, and each and every week, we're going to be embarking on a journey with the ultimate goal being transformation to our highest potential. And now, let's get out of the box. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of the Box Radio. I am your host, Christine Blosdale, and today we are doing a follow-up program. Not too long ago, I did an interview with one HG Tudor, who is a self-proclaimed, actually has been diagnosed as a narcissistic sociopath, who, as part of his growing awareness and treatment, has been writing about how he and his kind behave and what goes through their minds in order to provide people, victims, with insight and enlightenment. And the program that we did was so successful and had such great response, I decided to ask HG back on Out of the Box Radio so we can explore a little bit more about the world of a narcissist, what happens to folks who get caught up in the narcissist world as well. And from my perspective during the show, I really want to offer ways for people to heal and to just wrap their head around it and to go beyond just the sort of the anger and the hurt and the destruction that happens when one falls into a relationship or connection with a narcissist. So I want to welcome back to the program HG Tudor. HG, welcome back.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for inviting me back.
For people who are not familiar with the term narcissist or narcissistic behavior, if you don't mind, I know we explained a little bit about this in the first program, but let's go back over that. A narcissist, in particular, what you are. Let's talk about that. What is a narcissist in general?
A narcissist is an individual that, in clinical terms, satisfies certain criteria that have been set down in the DSM guide, which sets out a number of disorders. And everybody has narcissistic traits. So one has traits whereby one may think highly of oneself. One may have traits in terms of being grandiose, for example. And if somebody has a couple of those traits and in a mild form, there is nothing untoward about that. And indeed, many people refer to having healthy narcissistic traits. But there comes a point when a collection of those indicative criteria under the DSM are met, and in a certain degree of strength, that constitutes a finding that an individual is suffering from narcissistic personality disorder. And so one of the most telling of those criteria is the fact that the individual has no empathy, is incapable of feeling concern for others and putting themselves in the shoes of others. From my perspective, my diagnosis was of a narcissistic sociopath, whereby the extent of my narcissism is such that it coincides with antisocial traits as well, which would be diagnosed under antisocial personality disorder. And what I've done in terms of my work and the work that I've been undergoing by way of treatment is that one can categorize narcissists on a spectrum. So if you take a spectrum and on the far left, one has empathic individuals, so they will have very few narcissistic traits, and indeed will have a lot of empathic traits. So they are honest, they are decent, they are devoted to the concept of love, they seek the truth, and they care considerably for other people. And indeed, some of those empathic traits can be such that an individual, if they were watching a film where somebody
suffers a loss, say their child dies, the empathic individual feels just as upset as the individual in the film. They feel such a connection. So those empathic individuals on the far left. In the middle, you have what I call the normals, and those are people who have very few empathic traits, a handful of them, and they'll have a few narcissistic traits. That's the middle ground. And then we move to the right. And the more you move to the right, the more narcissistic traits appear, the greater they are in strength until they reach the definition of narcissistic personality disorder. And that is where you meet the lesser narcissist. And the lesser narcissist is an individual whose cognitive function is lower than usual, and they have a lower threshold in terms of the self-control that they exhibit. They have a number of other traits, but for the time being, those two suffice in terms of definition. Move further to the right, and the cognitive function increases along with the narcissistic traits, and you have the mid-range narcissist. And those individuals tend to have the hallmark of being quite passive-aggressive in the way that they behave. They sulk, they dole out silent treatments, they have a reasonable amount of charm, and they have a greater degree of self-control over their actions and the fury that rages inside. And then we move further to the right again, and that is where I reside, as a greater or a narcissistic sociopath, highly calculating, cognitive function increased even further, utterly devoid of empathy, and only thinks about oneself. And the difference is that where I am, I have an awareness of what I am. The lesser and the mid-range do not know what they are. They have no insight. And if you were to tell them they were a narcissist, the lesser probably wouldn't even understand the word, and the mid-range would reject it and probably turn around and say, no, you are the narcissist.
Yeah, right.
So essentially there is a sort of rough guide to what I refer to as the sort of empathic and narcissistic continuum. And the interesting thing to note about all of that, Christine, is that if one looks at it as a straight line, those who are particularly empathic, codependents, and what I call super empaths, and we can return to that later, are over to the far left. Normal's in the middle, and then your narcissist to the right. But if you were to imagine them as a clock face, and if you imagine that the empaths occupy the space between 11 and 12 o'clock, and the narcissists occupy the space between 12 and 1 o'clock, if one goes clockwise, they're a long way apart. But if one goes anti-clockwise, from narcissist to empath, they're very close together, because interestingly, there are similarities in terms of our behaviours, because my kind need empathic individuals to the extent that empathic individuals feel or have a need to have a narcissist in their life.
Would you say that the empathic people are the chosen victims of the narcissist because of that ability to feel and to love, or does that matter when does the narcissist even think that?
It matters considerably.
Uh-huh.
When I talk about an empathic individual, I attach to it a particular description. I know that there are those, when they refer to empaths, refer to it as somebody who feels in tune, if you will, with the world, that they can almost sense emotions, and that they can feel. Probably the easiest way to think of it is that they feel like it's the Force from Star Wars, that they can feel a disturbance in the Force. When I talk about empaths, I don't mean it in that sense, but that's not to say that that description's wrong. I just use it in a different way in terms of the concept of empathy, namely caring about people. And those who are empathic have these various traits, which I have identified through my many years of interaction with empathic individuals, and also as a consequence of my engagement with my good doctors, whereby they have traits of honesty, decency, fidelity. They seek the truth. They must know the truth.
Yes.
And such like. Now, my kind can sniff those traits out in individuals. We can sense them, but we can tell from the way that somebody talks, the words that they use, the way that they act, the gestures, the expressions. And therefore, if you imagine walking into a bar, anybody who is empathic lights up in, say, blue, and anybody who's a narcissist would light up in red. Now, a lesser and a mid-range would still notice the empathic individuals. They would notice the expressions that tell them this individual is caring, but the lesser just knows through instinct, because he doesn't know what he is, and he doesn't know that he needs these empathic individuals. But we have to sniff out those who are particularly empathic for a number of reasons. And the two primary reasons are those empathic traits mean those people are more susceptible to being seduced by our kind, and they are also better at providing us with fuel, or what some people call narcissistic supply, which is the lifeblood of the narcissist.
Yes.
So a normal person isn't, if you like, full of fuel, and also they're less likely to be seduced because they don't particularly strongly believe in the concept of love or truth or honesty, and therefore they are not as good a catch. Now, they still have some fuel because they give out emotions.
Right.
Yeah. So the normal person would be somebody that I might attach to myself as what I call a tertiary source. So you might have a normal person who passes me in the street and I'm looking particularly sharp in my suit, etc. And this lady smiles at me because she finds me attractive. She gives me a little bit of fuel by that smiling, because that is a positive emotional reaction by her to me. And as a consequence, I derive fuel from her. But she may be a normal. So as a consequence, there's a bit of fuel there, but she's not somebody that I would then necessarily target to try and draw them into a closer relationship with me. Whereas the empathic individuals, because they are more susceptible to being seduced, and because they carry more fuel in them, some of them are absolute super tankers of fuel, they are prized targets for my kind. And there are a whole different variety of empathic individuals. You have the empath, the super empath, the codependent. And just recently, I've been writing about the empathic tendencies in terms of the carrier empath or the magnet empath. And I'll be continuing to write more about that in due course, because they have particular tendencies which appeal to our kind as well. Now, as I say, the lesser and the mid-range narcissist just knows that they feel this attraction to this individual, but they don't understand necessarily why it is. They fulfill a need in them. I have a greater understanding because of my awareness, but also I have taken time in order to hone my skills and to become much more of an effective machine, and in tandem with the work that I've done with my doctors, to analyse what are these traits, to understand how they manifest, and to understand why they're so attractive to us. And that's why I have been writing about these various classifications, which also helps people understand what they are, and in turn assists them in understanding why they stand out like a neon sign to my kind.
And that brings us to why I wanted to have you back on the program. You write about these experiences, and most importantly, you warn people about your kind, about narcissists, and about the symptoms. What I love about the work that you do is also that you remind people that you're not jealous, you're not insecure, you are in a relationship with a very manipulative person, in particular, a narcissist, and you try and get them. You basically tell them to get out. So that is the redemption of you, HG, which is why because I tell people about the show. I'll be honest with you. I've done radio and interviews for 15 years. I've been a radio producer for 15 years. My absolute favorite show of my entire career was the first program that I did with you, because of the fact that, number one, I know it's going to help a lot of people. That's true. But number two, because there is a redemption within you, that you are not only, you're going through treatment, but through your blogs, and people can check you out on, I know HG Tudor, you can check him out on Facebook. Also, you're on Twitter, correct?
That's right, yes.
And
the blog can be found at Narcsite, Narcsite, narcsite.com.
Narcsite.com. And on Facebook, it's Knowing the Narcissist, correct?
That's right, yes.
And I really encourage people to, along with this interview and sharing this interview, and also part 1, to please do check out the blog, because so many people are getting just much needed help and validation, because let's face it, HG, that when people, and a lot of it seems to me, a lot of them are women, although I know there are women narcissists. I know there's women narcissists, but their hearts are absolutely shattered, and they're confused, and they don't trust anyone anymore. So I want to get into that aspect of, why, when and why, or no, let's just go back to, when did you decide that you needed to come forward, either through the treatment, or to come forward and tell people about your kind, and to warn them about who you are and who others like you are?
Okay. To an extent, I operate as a paradox, because in real life, very few people know that I'm a narcissistic sociopath. And for the moment, I'm going to keep it that way, because it would cause an adverse reaction, both in terms of my social life and also my professional life. So I am what I am and operate in the way that I do, with very few people actually knowing what I am. The only people that do know in real life are my doctors and certain members of my scheming family. Now, in terms of the blog, that operates as a sterile arena, if you will, which allows me to explain the way that I think and the way that I act. And the reason that came about was as a consequence of my engagement in treatment. And I was forced into treatment. I didn't do it voluntarily. And my family, because of the way that I had been behaving over apparently a number of years, according to them, albeit much of what they've said is based on lies and their skewed perception. However, they posed essentially a situation to me whereby I would be denied something that I wanted if I didn't do it, and I would also potentially face some form of criminal and regulatory investigation if I didn't do it. Now, the investigations don't concern me because they have no basis, but the time taken and the disruption that they would cause is something I don't want. So in order to achieve my long-term aims, I agreed that I would undergo this treatment. And then, as part of this treatment, which was based on getting me to understand what I am, which I already knew, but it was then became more about understanding how I am what I am, why do I do what I do, what is the impact on other people, how that might be addressed, whether I should and ought to make changes and how those changes ought to be effected. And this has been going on for some time, but it was felt because in one of the early sessions with the good doctors, I explained that I enjoyed writing, and I showed them some of the work that I'd done from a number of years ago and some more recent stuff, and they thought that it was rather good. And they suggested that it would be a useful exercise, almost like homework for me, if I was to write about what I am, but to do it in an anonymous fashion and to write books about it and to put it in a blog and write articles and basically provide my perspective. Now, of course, that appealed to me in the sense that it was anonymous, so it was not going to impact on my real life machinations and shenanigans.
Right.
It also appealed to me because I like an audience.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yes,
I thought,
you do.
well, why not? And it also assisted me because the more that I've done it, the more I've learned about myself. Yeah. It's enabled me to hone my skills, but also it has enabled me to engage with lots of very interesting people and learn from them. And I don't do it because I want to help anybody, because quite frankly, I really do not care. But I do it because when somebody sends me a message thanking me for opening their eyes, that provides me with fuel. Not a huge amount, because I don't know who this person is, I've never met them, and they're communicating with me through an electronic medium.
Right.
So
right.
if that person was a friend who I knew, who came up to me and tried to hug me, although I don't like being hugged, but who tried to hug me and explained, HG, you've opened my eyes to the terrible relationship I have with my wife, and I think she's a narcissist, I would get a huge amount of fuel from their gushing praise because they're there in front of me. But through the blog, I do get some fuel, and I've never denied all of that. But that's not the primary reason for doing it. Part of it is because I wanted to be able to understand myself better, and I also wanted other people to understand, because what I've effectively been doing by sharing my knowledge has been weaponizing empaths, and it appeals to my perverse sense of humor that I am, because I have this concept of believing myself and understanding myself to effectively be omnipotent and able to affect everything around me, because I must control my environment.
Yes.
It makes sense that if I can then say, right, I give you, empath number one, the blessing of understanding, so now you can escape your narcissist. And I've set up a little battle going on somewhere, and all around the world, these people are becoming enlightened and empowered. And that appeals to me, that I'm able to do that, because it fits in with my notion of power. And power is something that's particularly important to me. Now, if the byproduct of all of that is that they feel better about it, then so be it. It's a win-win. But and if they escape the worst of the behaviours that they've suffered so far, and then can get themselves on a path moving forward, so be it. Good for them. And they will then praise me, and they will tell other people about it, and more people will come to the blog. And so ultimately, I gain more understanding, because I read everything that everybody posts on the blog, because 98% of the contributions are very interesting, people's different experiences, and there are some bright people that post there, and they have their own views and opinions of why a narcissist behave as they do and empaths behave as they do. I lay out the facts of the way that I behave. I lay out the facts of how we are perceived. I lay out the facts of why we do as what we do, so people can understand it. And once they understand, they can then take the appropriate measures to then try and counter what has happened to them and to escape from it. But it's an ongoing process. I'm still a work in process, according to the good doctors, and I'm finding the interactions fascinating.
I find them absolutely fascinating. I mean, just mind-blowing, because it's almost like a magician. It's almost like a magician telling the public what how magicians do these tricks. And
absolutely, that's a good point, because oddly enough, somebody did ask me and made it that very same point, Christine, was to say, you are like the magician who's giving away how the tricks are performed. Aren't the other magicians going to get annoyed with you? And the answer to that is, most of the other magicians don't know that they are magicians. And even if they were annoyed with me, what do I care? Because there's no loyalty amongst narcissists.
And it feeds, and even if they were angry with you, it still would feed it still feeds you, right? It does
Absolutely
it,
right. It would be fuel.
Right.
So
This is what's amazing. This is what's wild to me, is so the fuel can be, of course, it can be gushing love and attraction, and someone flirting with you, falling in love with you,
yes.
All of that energy. But then also you get a charge, you get a feeding off of the emotional distress or anger. So let's talk about that if we can. Let's go into that a little bit, and let's also remind our listeners too. I want to just let them know that I'm speaking with HG Tudor. He has an incredible platform. I hope that you can check it out on Facebook and also Twitter. On Facebook, it's Knowing the Narcissist. It's a daily blog available on both, again, Twitter and Facebook. And let's talk, HG, about that, the feeding of both the positive praise and attraction, and then also the emotional, the anger, the lashing out and things like that from the victims that fall prey to you.
Okay. Fuel comes in many forms, and it comes from various sources. The best sources are empathic sources, because the emotional output is stronger from those individuals. As you've identified, it can be positive in nature. So a very strong form of positive fuel is for somebody to say to me, HG, I love you. That is a very, very strong expression of positive fuel towards me.
Yes.
Also, if somebody, for example, buys me a gift, that, although they don't say anything, that action is positive in nature. We also gain negative fuel. And therefore, if you are angry, if you are crying, if you're frustrated, if you're upset, we gain this charge, this negative fuel from you. And many people seem to think that if they were to turn around and say to the narcissist, you're a PFS, you're a complete bastard, I hate you, that somehow the narcissist is going to be offended and hurt by that. Now, what we will do is we will act like it's hurt us. We will act offended because we've identified fuel. So we'll argue back with you to make you give us even more fuel. And so when you send a text saying, I am a disgusting human being who has no regard for anybody else, and I'm self-centered and you hate me and you wish I was dead, I gain fuel from that, because in my mind, I think of you sat there upset and angry writing that text.
Yes.
And I get what's known as thought fuel from that. If you're stood next to me, sobbing your heart out, saying, please stop hurting me, I get proximate fuel, and that's the stronger type. And any form of emotional reaction provides fuel. And the reason for this is that I have to be validated by everything around me. I can't fuel myself. I can be on my own for a period of time if I've had plenty of fuel beforehand. I can be on my own if I'm in contact with people, say through Skype or through messages. I could be completely on my own with no telephone or no electronic device if I've been fueled beforehand. But ordinarily, because of this vast void that operates inside of me, I have no capability to fuel myself. You can. You have that capability. Empathic people have that capability. I've been created without it. And what I have to do is ineffectively feed off and leech off everybody else's emotions to validate my own existence. And so the worst thing that can ever happen to me is that I walk in a room and everybody ignores me. Because to my mind, not only are you not giving me fuel, that is a massive criticism and it wounds me. And so there are many things that normal people do who do not think that they've done anything wrong, but the narcissist goes berserk because the narcissist perceives it as a criticism. And it's usually actions rather than words that cause it. Because when you say something to a narcissist, you invariably inject some emotion in what you're saying because of your expression of your face and the tone of your voice. So even if even if you say to a narcissist, I hate you and I think you're an awful human being, your brow will be furrowed, your jaw might be jutting out. So we can see that's anger on your part, and that provides us with the fuel. So the key, if you ever want to wound us, would be to say, in as neutral tone as you can muster, with a neutral expression, I hate you, I think you are insignificant. That is a critical, and that really wounds us. But it's even easier for you to do it through actions. So if you ignore us, that is a huge criticism. If you serve us last in a queue at the bar, that is a criticism to us. Even though we might have been last in the queue, that doesn't matter to us. We think we should be served first because of our huge sense of entitlement. So there's lots of little gestures and actions that people would regard as completely innocuous, but to us, they are criticisms. And that wounds us because it reminds us of the sense of being weak and unimportant and helpless, and takes us back to a place many years ago that we try to bury and forget about.
And that leads me to my next question for you. I think most people who are listening to this are saying, like, why? The big question is why? Why? They can wrap their head around the fuel part and the gaining fuel from the emotional upset, the triggering that a narcissist does to an empath. But I think the biggest question is, why do you do what you do? And we had gone over this before about, is a narcissist just born a narcissist, or is one created? And if you can, let our listeners know what you've discovered through your treatment and through your journey about how a narcissist becomes a narcissist, how a person becomes a narcissist.
I have identified, if you will, several schools of thought in that regard. Some of it has arisen from the interesting comments that have been posted on the blog, whereby there are those who say that it is a genetic predisposition, and it's genetics that cause us to be the way that we are. I found that view to be in the minority. There are then other views which have been expressed that suggest that the genetics create a susceptibility to becoming a narcissist, but it doesn't necessarily follow that will happen. So if you like, it's almost like a latent thing within a particular individual, which may be activated or is not activated. And then the majority view that I've come across, and this is certainly applicable to my own experience, is that it is environmental factors, namely the way that one has been parented and the way that one's childhood developed. And essentially, I know from what happened to me when I was a child, much of which I tend not to want to think about and gets pulled out of me by the good doctors, and I find it difficult to talk about. But essentially, because of events that I suffered as a child, in the way that I was treated, particularly by my mother, my narcissism arose as a self-defense mechanism to help me cope with feeling powerless when I was, in effect, if you will, little HG. And I was expected to be a particularly high attainer, and I was. Academically, I was often at the top of the class. I excelled at sport, but I was never good enough. And the discipline that I faced, and the isolation and admonishment, and the repeated put downs, and the lack of love that I was shown, I can never recall being hugged by my mother. I never heard her say "I love you" to me. And my father, people say that he was a good man. He's dead now, but people, I've understood, was effectively in the thrall of my mother, and was both strong in that he stayed there, but weak because he never did anything about it with regard to me.
Right.
He seemed to spend most of his time protecting my half-brother and my brother and my sister. And he essentially said to me that he felt that I was perfectly capable of looking after myself.
As a child,
so in a sense,
as a little boy. Right.
As a little boy. So in a sense, he abandoned me and left me at the mercy of my narcissistic mother. Now, what I saw was the way that she behaved, and also there are other narcissists in my family. 2 of my uncles are narcissists as well. And I saw the way that people kowtowed to them. I saw the way that my father scurried around after my mother. I saw the way that people in the community were both respectful and fearful of the Tudor family. And I witnessed power. And I realized that in order to stop feeling lost, and in order to gain the approval that I'd always sought, that the most effective thing to do would be to seize that power. And I essentially had one of the best teachers in my mother. And so I copied what she did. And I saw the way that she treated people. I began to understand, not fully because I was at this stage a teenager, but not fully. But I knew that she manipulated people, and I watched, and I've written about some of this in the blog, and I will be going into much more detail about it in certain works that are in progress called Matriarch and Little Boy Lost, which will tell everybody about the full extent of what I endured as a child. And it is interesting because if you'd had asked me about this the last time, I wouldn't have wanted to talk to you about it. And I think that now I anticipated that it would come up as a subject, and I ensured that before we started this discussion, I was particularly well fueled, so that dealing with talking about this subject, because it makes me feel uncomfortable, it makes me feel restless, and reminds me of the person that I no longer associate myself with. I created a different HG, one who is powerful, one that is invulnerable, one that is superior. And I understand from my work with the good doctors that that was my self-defense mechanism.
Of course.
And
Right.
they have now been looking at ways to try and cause me to slowly relinquish that mindset. And of course, we have something of an impasse because I am an effective machine. I'm very, very good at what I do. I'm surrounded by people. I'm charming and magnetic, and I find it very easy to engage with people because I have to in order to get the fuel, and that's what protects me. And therefore, I say to myself, why should I stop doing something that protects me and is effective? Why should I stop doing something that I know that works?
Right.
Why should I take that risk? Because I, as yet, and I'm keeping an open mind about it because I have seen subtle changes in my thought process at the very least. Why should I take the risk of doing something which could cause me a problem?
Wow, HG, that was that I think just that explanation, that real honest explanation of what you're going through is very powerful. Not only for the victims of narcissists, but in particular for fellow narcissists who are listening to this right now. Because it's I mean, and I know, and again, I know you don't care about really necessarily helping anyone get through this, but for your own evolution, because as I had said before too, it has to be very lonely. Yes, I mean, you're surrounded by people that give you the fuel and they praise you, and that's by design. But at the same time, it must be extremely, extremely lonely place, and perhaps somewhere within you. You know you need to heal, and it doesn't has nothing to do with anybody else, but it's just for you and your own peace of mind.
I understand that mindset, and it has been said to me in different ways by different people. I do not consider myself to be lonely at all, and I know this is something often that's thrown at me by victims who basically say, well, you are just a lonely man and you'll grow old, and when your powers fade, you'll be on your own and you'll die terrified and sad. Well, no, I won't. It's because, quite simply, I have honed and refined what I am so that I am able to engage with people. The last few days I've spent in Scotland, a combination of business and seeing some friends. And whilst there, I was staying in this lovely country house hotel, very old. And as soon as I arrived, I was talking to the head receptionist there, who became very friendly with me, and then one of the staff. And I got on extremely well with them. And they would come into my room and ask, is there anything you need? And they'd stop and they'd talk and so on. So I'm able to draw people to me so that I never feel lonely. And yes, I do some and have done and do some terrible things to people, but not everybody, because I am in sufficient control of my abilities to know when and where to unleash my dark side. And that invariably is against those that cross me and those who fail to give me what I want. But those that serve a purpose and those that contribute to what I require, the maintenance of my facade, of me being a good guy, I will treat those people well. I will do things for them because it serves my benefit. And so I'm surrounded by people are drawn to me, and people like me. Yes, there are people who hate me, those who've crossed me, and ex-partners of mine who I've callously discarded in the past. Some still love me, some like me, some hate me. A couple would rather me be dead. But all of that's fuel to me because it's all attention.
Yes.
If they were indifferent to me, I would hate it. But I'm never lonely, and nor am I going to become lonely, because I've always got the capability and the capacity to keep people to me.
Is part of that also having the mask of when you're around people that they think that they don't think of you as a narcissist if they don't know you really well, but they think of you as a fellow empath? Do you have that mask where you pretend to be empathic, or do you even need to? Do you even need to?
I can feign empathy because I know what it looks like, but I don't feel it.
Right.
So I know how to put on a concerned expression. I know how to look sympathetic. Now, there are times when, because I don't feel it, and my immediate response when I see somebody perhaps fall over is one of revulsion for their weakness and spite at their clumsiness. But then, within a matter of seconds, or even shorter time period, I realise that if I was to laugh at them or sneer, that would not be an appropriate response in respect of the other people that are around me. And therefore they would think, why is that man or why is HG just laughing at that lady who's fallen over in the street? So I know that the appropriate response, because I've seen it so many times from other people, is to look concerned and to come out with some mealy-mouthed platitude as to, oh, are you all right? Or, here, let me help you up. Because then that makes me look good. But the brutal honesty is I really don't care. And if I had somewhere else I needed to get to, which I viewed as more important, I would step over her in the street and carry on in my way.
I'm feeling, especially with this current election that we've had, well, and in general, because I think that a lot of politicians are narcissists, but some of the people that rise to the highest levels of government globally, I mean, I think that they might be also on the higher threshold, on further to the right of sociopathic narcissists.
Yes, I agree with you. And the reason for that is, if you lead a country, you are a captain of industry, whereby you are the chairman or CEO of a listed company. To get to that point, you will have had to have competed with various other people. Those people will have tried to pull you off the ladder as you try to clamber up. If you were burdened by guilt at firing somebody because they were incompetent who was your friend, your business would not be as effective. If you were troubled by remorse about having spoken in a high-handed manner to a colleague because they'd failed to submit a report on time, your business would not be succeeding. If you were worried about what was happening in a village on the border because troops were amassing, you more than likely would start to see your country being overrun. And those with empathic traits such as honesty and decency and caring for others, guilt, who experience sorrow and remorse, I acknowledge that those are held up as laudable traits, and they certainly are in certain spheres, but they are not if you want to get to the top. And my kind have been created devoid of these particular emotions and focused on success and focused on getting the job done, of not caring if her feelings are hurt, of not caring that you've just fired your friend. It doesn't matter. The needs of the business must come first. And consequently, those who are political leaders, captains of industry, often the very best in show business, pop stars, sportsmen, etc., are highly narcissistic, because those narcissistic qualities mean two things. One, you're not held back by the empathic traits, and two, the drive that comes with narcissism means you want to succeed. Now, it doesn't mean that every narcissist is successful. Far from it. The lesser narcissist is invariably not, because their cognitive function doesn't assist them in that way. They are not particularly bothered about being physically superior. All they care about is that their belly is full and they have a roof over their head, for example, and that they have somebody run around after them. That would be a victim narcissist, as I call them. So not every narcissist is going to be successful, but I would say that a lot of successful people have strong narcissistic traits, and it's particularly the case with leaders.
Well, in particular, to have a complete lack of empathy, it makes it quite easy to bomb another country, to kill people in war, to
That's right.
to loot to loot the treasury, to take away people's pensions or whatever. If you have no empathy, it doesn't keep you up at night. It doesn't make
That's absolutely right. There's two interesting examples of that. There was a tycoon in this country called Robert Maxwell. He was a newspaper magnate, very wealthy man. And what he did was he raided the pension fund of his newspaper empire and stole money from pensioners, many, many millions of pounds. And he did it because he regarded that money as his, because he had created the company. He had no conscience. And his narcissistic tendencies there manifested on a huge scale. He was entitled to that money. He had no sense of remorse. He didn't recognize any kind of boundary. That money was his to use as he saw fit, and he plundered it to plug a hole in the operating arm of his businesses. And that same man, on a completely different scale, was witnessed by his three children, who came downstairs on Christmas morning to find that he couldn't wait to discover what his wife had purchased for the children for Christmas. And they came down to find their dad sat underneath the Christmas tree with all of the presents opened and him sat looking at the toys. He cared more about knowing about what those toys were than the joy of his children opening them. And that shows exactly the mindset of an individual. And Maxwell was clearly a narcissistic sociopath. And another example was that in this country, I think it was during the 1960s, when the Cold War was at its height, that the government considered that after a nuclear exchange, that sociopaths should be put in charge of the rebuilding of the country, because they would suffer less ill effects arising from the trauma of a nuclear Armageddon, and also they would get the job done and would not be concerned about seeing people starving to death or dying of radiation and so on, and that they would be the best people to get the job done. And that's quite interesting that a government paper looked at and identified that sociopathic individuals should be put in a place of trust and responsibility in terms of rebuilding a country after nuclear war. So even the own government recognised that there was a, in inverted commas, good that can come out of a sociopathic individual.
Wow.
So that is why, as I say, our kind, get the job done. Now, of course, it all depends on your mindset. Some people will say that the cost associated with doing that is not acceptable.
Yeah.
My kind always say it always is. The end always justifies the means. Empathic individuals would say, no, the rights of an individual, their feelings, their emotions should be taken into account. You cannot chuck them to one side. But it raises an interesting debate, and I quite happily have that with people, but they will always lose, because at the end of the day, I will always do what serves me best.
Exactly. And that's where I want to take this now too. We have a little bit of time remaining, and I want to direct this to the victims, to your victims, to victims of narcissists, in particular elite narcissists, sociopathic narcissists, because people who are listening to this, invariably, the majority are people who have come in contact with those of your kind who have been through marriages, relationships, all kinds of different connections with you. And I want you to talk directly to them about getting out, how to get out. How do they break free from a charming, manipulative, lying, destructive individual? How do they break free from you?
The simple answer is to arm yourself with understanding. We want to keep you emotional because when you're emotional, you will make poor decisions, you will remain confused, and you will make no progress. Therefore, what you must do is understand what it is you're dealing with, why this person thinks as they do, why they act in the way that they do. Once you start to understand, you will not like it, but you will start to realize why they do as they do, because we look at everything from a different perspective than from anybody else. And that's what many people struggle with. They cannot understand why this person who was so loving 2 weeks ago is now so horrible. They think a normal person just wouldn't do that. And they're right. A normal person wouldn't do, but a narcissist would. Read everything you can. Once you realize that something is wrong, and often this happens when the devaluation period is ongoing, but most usually it's when that person has been cast to one side by the narcissist and the narcissist has ridden into the sunset and got a new partner. The victim needs to read about what has happened so they can understand that 1, none of it is their fault. 2, everything happened through instinct, calculation, and design, and that is part of the narcissistic dynamic, and that we want you to remain emotionally brittle. We will come back if you give us the opportunity to make your life a misery once again, although at first when we come back, it'll all be unicorns and rainbows again for a short period of time, but it will not last. But understand this, the person that you fell in love with was not real, it was an illusion. It hurts. I know it hurts because I've seen it in the eyes of my victims. Understand that, you've taken a large step forward. Then read my books, read other people's books, but more importantly, read my books. Read those and you'll understand the mindset. And in that understanding, you will also learn about ways that you can counter what we do. The best person to tell you how to deal with somebody like me is me. And then you'll read. And because if you read, you'll be distracted from worrying about us. And then you'll start to get your strength back. And if you read, you'll start to make decisions which are based on logic, cold, hard, effective decisions. And you'll stop acting emotionally. You won't get rid of all of the emotion immediately because that's the nature of an empathic individual. But you will then eventually purge the emotional infection that we've caused with you. You'll drive it out, and each day you'll make progress. But the key to it always is to understand. And the way to understand is to read. And then you can also seek help if you've suffered other symptoms, which are not things that I am qualified to talk about in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Go and see a healthcare professional about that type of thing. Perhaps go and see a therapist to deal with those types of things. But in terms of actually getting out, understand what you're dealing with, read, and it's all there. So then you can make the right decisions. Come to my blog, interact, ask me any questions you like. I will get around to answering them. It might take me a few days, it might take me a week, but I will answer them for you. You can also arrange to consult with me privately as well. There's a cost associated with that, but many people have done it and they found it to be very effective to help their understanding. But that is the central thing. Understand. And once you understand, everything will start to fall in place. And then you'll think, right, now I've grasped what it is. I don't like it. I hate him. I hate her. But now I understand what it is. I can move forward and make sense of things. Because we rely on keeping you stupid, if you will, keeping you in the dark, keeping you spinning round and round. And then we keep coming back and doing it over and over again. You can stop it. I've seen it happening. I've seen the evolution of people on my blog of their understanding. And I've also seen the messages that they've sent me in terms of how effective they've found what I've disclosed to them to help them. But reading and understanding is the key.
This is why I wanted you back, HG. Just that last final comment. I mean, that is exactly why. Folks, we've had HG Tudor on. He is a self-proclaimed narcissist sociopath, and he does share his observations and his platforms, Knowing the Narcissist, which is a daily blog available on Twitter and Facebook. Read. Listen, trust what he is saying right now. It is absolutely important if you find yourself in a relationship or connection with someone like HG that you do read and you learn about what you're going through and how you can free yourself as well. So thank you,
yes.
HG. Yes.
Sorry, Christy, I'll just add there, if I may.
Yes.
That even people may be listening and may not know whether they're entangled with a narcissist or not. If you find yourself in a relationship where things do not make sense, you find yourself, you are being belittled, abused in some kind of fashion, it doesn't mean that person is necessarily a narcissist, but there's a pretty good chance that they are. And therefore, as a consequence, even if you may not know whether they are a narcissist or not, if something doesn't feel right about the relationship, or you feel that you're suffering some kind of abuse arising from it, look into the work and read further, and you may find that certain light bulbs come on and you realize, yes, that is what I'm dealing with, and then you can get out. You do not automatically look at somebody and go, I'm with a narcissist. It tends to be more the symptoms of it, the confusion, the despair, the abuse, etc., which cause you to start down the line of looking for things to tell you what is causing these silent treatments, what is causing these sudden eruptions of anger and violence. Why is he having affairs? Why does he not speak to me? It's those types of things. And eventually, as you learn about those weapons that are utilized by abusive individuals, it will, more times than not, lead you to realize that you're entangled with a narcissist. Not always, but more often than not.
Thank you so much, HG.
You're very welcome.
I want to, again, to remind people that you can check out HG Tudor's work on Twitter and Facebook. It's Knowing the Narcissist. And also, HG, give out the website again.
The blog can be found at Narcsite. That's NARCSITE.com, narcsite.com. And the blog is probably the best place to come to because there's the greatest level of interaction there as well.
Thank you again, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for today's show, folks. We're going to have HG. I know we're going to have you back on, HG, because we're going to get a lot of comments about this. And I always welcome you back anytime that you have something that you want to get off your chest and you want to talk about. I welcome you back.
I'll always be happy to do that. So just let me know. Thank you, Christine.
I know, because you like to be the center of attention.
Absolutely. Why not?
Thank you again so much. It's been HG Tudor here on Out of the Box Radio. I want to remind listeners to tune in again next week for another installment of Out of the Box Radio. You can also subscribe to this program so you don't miss any episodes at iTunes and also iHeartRadio. Until next week, remember to always think outside of the box. Bye for now. Welcome to Out of the Box Radio with me, your host, Christine Blosdale. Out of the Box Radio is a weekly podcast of audible ear candy dedicated to bringing a fresh perspective on this thing that we call life. And each and every week, we're going to be diving into the topics that matter most with lively conversations on issues such as health, wellness, and transformational healing, all with the goal of creating a better world and becoming a happier human being. I will be your tour guide for this epic adventure, and each and every week we're going to be embarking on a journey with the ultimate goal being transformation to our highest potential. And now, let's get out of the box. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Out of the Box with Christine. I am your host, Christine Blosdale, and today we are launching part 3 of our interview with a Master Narcissist series with HG Tudor, who is a narcissistic psychopath. HG has written extensively about the dark art of narcissism for many years and shares these ongoing revelations at his website, narcsite.com. Before we begin today's show, I'd like to mention that if you are a victim of a narcissist or believe you could be, please listen to our 2 previous interviews. Links to those shows will accompany this program so that you have access to all 3 in the series. It is also imperative that you share not only this interview, but the others as well with friends and family, as there is a very good chance that someone you know, in addition to yourself, has suffered at the hands of a narcissist. I want to also mention that this interview is for the sole purpose of healing the heart and minds of victims and does not in any way condone the destruction that narcissists deliver to their victims. Also, a quick warning for those of you whose lives have been devastated or destroyed by these people. This program may trigger you. It may bring up painful emotions that are difficult to deal with. If at any time this is too much for you, please turn off the interview and come back at a later time when you are able to fully hear what is being discussed. The goal of this program is to help you identify the narcissist in your life, their patterns and their tactics, and ultimately to help you be free once and for all of these emotional vampires. With that said, I want to welcome back to the show HG Tudor. In addition to his website, narcsite.com, he also can be found at Knowing the Narcissist on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. HG is a narcissistic psychopath who is also a leading resource for people to understand the way that narcissists think and operate in order to enable them to escape and beat the narcissist by knowing the narcissist. He's written over 45 books on the subject, hundreds of articles, and operates a blog which has well over 15 million hits. And he has assisted hundreds of thousands of people and has been described as the world's #1 authority on narcissism. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome HG back to the show. HG Tudor, it's been quite a while, like 2.5 years, I think, by my calculations, since the last time I had you on. Welcome back.
That's right. Thank you very much, Christine. It's a pleasure to be invited back on again.
Yes, and as I was saying there in the introduction, obviously the subject matter of narcissism and narcissists is quite popular. You have over 15 million hits on your blog, and I will say the first program that we did has well over 250,000 views on YouTube at this moment. It's growing every day. The second one is close behind. So there's a lot of you out there, isn't there?
Well, there's only one of me, naturally, but there's a lot of my kind out there, absolutely, and it's far greater than people realize, because they maintain a misperception as to what narcissists are. There's many people that just don't have the information to recognize what our kind are. And there is a failing in that there is this common perception that the narcissist is your alpha male, eats what he kills, Jim Bunny, grandiose show-off. And that's just one flavor. And two of the biggest problems that arise are, first of all, society as a whole dilutes and euphemizes a lot of the behaviors of our kind and calls it something else. And popular television and mass media, radio programs, social media portray our behavior and call it something else. And that is dangerous for people. Helps us, enables us to move amongst you very readily without people realizing until it's too late. But it causes a huge amount of confusion. And the other aspect of it is that when people are ensnared by us, there are particular types of people who are far more susceptible to ensnarement than others. And because of that, their mind is affected in a way that causes them to possibly see the problem, but not see it clearly, and continue to engage with us in some form to their detriment, although they think that what they're doing is sensible. And I refer to that as the concept of emotional thinking, which is something we may touch on later on in the discussion. But in short, there's lots of us.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just the male, although would you say that there's a predominance of men that are narcissists versus women? I know that there are both. But
I'd say it's roughly equal. And again, the difficulty is it's the identification. Male narcissists tend to be easier to spot in the conventional sense. But in my experience, and of course there's no surveys that would support all of this, it's just based on one's experience. But having been in and around my kind and know my kind inside out for a number of years, the anecdotal experience is that the numbers are roughly equal between the genders.
And for those who are just brand new to this word and to this subject matter, what is a narcissist, and are there different levels of a narcissist?
A narcissist is somebody who suffers from narcissistic personality disorder as defined by the DSM, the psychiatric manual. That obviously has been compiled by a body and on a particular scientific basis, and naturally has a validity. What it doesn't do, however, is go far enough in explaining the various flavours of the behaviours that occur. In essence, a narcissist is someone who has no emotional empathy, may exhibit grandiosity, but that's not always there, is manipulative, in most cases doesn't see that they are manipulative, doesn't see that they're grandiose, sometimes does, but most narcissists are actually blinded to their behaviour. These individuals may be haughty. There's always a lack of accountability, but again, that will manifest in different ways. There are key elements of what I call the narcissistic dynamic, but again, there are variances depending upon where you fit in with that. But essentially, it's regarded as a disorder because our way of behaviour doesn't fit in with the norm of society. And people on the receiving end of it, whether it's romantic, whether it's social, familial, in a business sense, or a neighbour, will find that the individual concerned engages in a course of behaviour which is problematic. And the extent of that problem really does vary upon the nature of your ensnarement and the type of narcissist you're involved with. But it could be matters so serious as being raped, physically assaulted, having money taken from you, or somebody who drifts in and out of your life without explanation or excuse. Somebody who makes huge demands on you and is always having you running around doing things for them but never lifts a finger for you. It may be an individual that calls you names. Somebody always belittles you, never thanks you, or gives you any support in terms of what you do. So there's a huge range of manifestations of this behaviour. And in terms of levels, if you've mentioned, I categorize it in a lexicon to make it understandable for people in terms of lessers, mid-range, and greater. And there are subdivisions within each of those as well. To go into all of that would take a very long time because there's different characteristics and traits. And the important thing really is for people to analyze the relationship they have. And most of the time this comes up in a romantic sense because that's where the greatest impact is felt. That if you are with an individual whose behaviors are causing you to become hurt, upset, puzzled, bewildered, or you just feel that you are less of a person, that raises a question mark. Healthy people don't behave that way. It doesn't mean that person's necessarily a narcissist, but it should raise a question. And if you're in any doubt about it, come and read my work, or you can consult with me, and I will assist you in determining whether this individual is a narcissist or not. And there's huge benefits from knowing one way or the other. But the point is, those early indicators are, for instance, many people say to me, HG, this individual calls me names. Is he a narcissist? And I always explain, well, you can't make a decision based upon one behavior. It's merely an indicator. It's not determinative. What one has to look at is a range of behaviors over a period of time and see a pattern. Empathic people also have self-regulation in that they will put themselves in the shoes of the other individual. So, for instance, if they found a wallet lying on the floor in the street and they picked it up and thought about, oh, I could take the money, they would go, well, I wouldn't like it if somebody did this to me and didn't return my wallet. And also, well, I shouldn't take the money because actually that's stealing. So with some people, think about taking it, they would hand it in at the police station. With others, it's a case of they think about it and they self-regulate. Those individuals, those are healthy responses. A disordered individual would pick up the wallet without any concern, pocket it. And if somebody said to that person, well, shouldn't you hand it in? The individual who's disordered, who's a narcissist, would turn around and say, well, they've lost it, it's their problem, not mine. Or, well, my need is greater than theirs. Or, oh, I am going to hand it in at the police station, but then doesn't go and do it. Because that individual has no emotional empathy for the person that has lost the wallet. So what people have got to look at is a range of behaviors over time. But if you think something's not quite right here, then that is a red flag, and you should have regard to it. The problem is that people spot red flags but don't act on them. Why? They don't have access to the information, and they receive the wrong information because there's a hell of a lot of it out there. So, for instance, somebody who incessantly text messages you each and every day, throughout the day, that is not a healthy behavior. Why? It shows a sense of entitlement on the part of the person who's sending those text messages to you. It shows poor boundary recognition. They don't leave you alone. It shows a lack of accountability for the behavior. I'll just keep texting, and it doesn't matter what the response is. It also means that they're exerting control, and that's what narcissism is all about. It's about controlling our environments and everybody in them. So somebody who's incessantly texting you, but even though they're texting you lovely things and paying you compliments, the fact is that is not a healthy behavior. But people fall for it because what they think is, oh, well, yeah, it might be a little bit excessive, but he's just really into me. This is exciting that he's so passionate about things. No, a healthy person doesn't behave that way. You're likely being love bombed by a narcissist. That behavior in itself, I underline, does not mean that it's a narcissist, but it's a significant indicator. And then you need to look at the range of behaviors. So it's a case of where you experience a behavior. If you are given cause to question it, then you need to read further into it and listen to the instincts that you've got. Now, in the early stages of being seduced by a narcissist, many people completely fail to either see and or adhere to the red flags. Why? Because it's so good. It's so exciting. And most people, it's when things start to go wrong that they perhaps start to question things. But what they do is they invariably end up attributing the behavior of the narcissist to some third-party event, or they blame themselves. Why? Because the type of people that we ensnare are usually empaths. Empaths have this trait of self-flagellation. A normal person can get ensnared by a narcissist, but generally what happens is this. When we start to devalue that individual, the normal person goes, well, sod this for a game of soldiers. This guy's a jerk. I'm out of here. Why? Because the normal person will have some empathy, but they are not addicted to narcissists, so they will walk away. Whereas empathic people have an addiction to us, and they struggle very, very badly, like any addict does, to give up the very thing that they're addicted to. And rather than think, this chap rings me up whenever it suits him, and whenever I call him, it's never convenient, he disappears for periods of time, I send him text messages and he never replies to them, then all of a sudden out of the blue he wants to meet up with me. I feel like I'm being picked up and put down, and I feel like I'm being used. Highly likely you're being ensnared, you're ensnared with a narcissist. But what happens is, rather than think that kind of treatment is unacceptable, I am not going to tolerate that. This chap might be a narcissist, or even if you don't know that label, it's as simple as this. I'm not being treated properly. I'm not going to put up with it. What the empath does is, I need to find out why I'm being treated like this. Exactly. Because empaths are truth seekers. Or I need to fix this situation. Why? Because empaths are healers and fixers. Or maybe there's something wrong with him that's making him behave this way. Have I done something to offend him? The empathic trait of guilt. Or maybe he's just really shy and I should perhaps be a bit more considerate towards him. The empathic trait of compassion. And your emotional thinking gets hold of these empathic traits, and also, in certain instances, narcissistic traits, because empaths have narcissistic traits as well. And it corrupts them. And what it does is it makes you think that this person is perhaps damaged and in need of your help. Well, yes, they're damaged, but they certainly don't need your help because they can't be fixed. And you don't need to get to the bottom of why it is by speaking to this individual, because you won't get a straight answer, because the narcissist instinctively wants to keep you ensnared and keep you in the game, keep you in the narcissist's fuel matrix. And so what happens is you as an empath often spot the behavior and think, well, something's going wrong. You're not so stupid as to realize I'm being treated badly. The individual will say, rather than them say, I'm not putting up with this anymore, it's disgusting and it's disrespectful, they will try to get to the bottom of the behaviors and find out what's wrong, try and fix them, or they'll blame themselves and think, maybe I've done something. Because empathic people always want to get an answer for behaviors. And there is an answer. You're dealing with a narcissist. But invariably, they won't know that, or if they kind of understand that that's the case, they don't fully understand what that means because they don't have access to the right information. And even when they do, their emotional thinking doesn't want them to apply that knowledge. It doesn't want them to apply the understanding and get away from the narcissist. The emotional thinking wants the empath to keep engaging with the narcissist. And it's crafty and it's conniving, and it will cause people to think that they need to go and get answers from the narcissist when actually they don't. And they will think that that's a sensible thing because the emotional thinking gets you doing things which aren't logical but makes you think that they are. That's how crafty it is. And so empathic individuals, rather than just turn around and walk away or say, I'm not putting up with this anymore, remain invested. And they self-flagellate, blame themselves, they try and work things out, and they fall prey to all of these euphemisms and platitudes that are racing around in society, which are, just give him some space and he'll come to you, or if he really loves you, let him go and he'll return to you, or, well, it's possibly that he's got commitment issues. Well, damn right he has, he's a narcissist, so he will never connect with you, but that's not the point. All of these phrases that get bandied around obscure it all. And victims are conned into taking these phrases and applying them to what is a disordered relationship, thinking that there is some way through it. The number of times that I see material just in the day-to-day when I'm walking past a newsstand, or I see something on the internet or something on the news, and there's someone saying, oh, you can heal this situation. And I just think, no, you can't. This person's ensnared with a narcissist, and you are encouraging them to do something that borders from either downright stupid or utterly dangerous. And there are so many people out there who just do not understand this subject.
No, and there's so many people that have become victims that it's obvious. I mean, it's obvious by the amount of people that are reaching out from the previous programs that we've done. Mm-hmm. But the subtitle of this program of Series 3 is How to Survive a Narcissistic Relationship. And I'm not putting that in the context of how to stay in a narcissistic relationship and survive.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about once you get out. And that's just from the previous times I've spoken to you. Mm-hmm. I know that your word of advice to people, if they believe they are in a narcissistic relationship, is to get out.
Yes.
And this is where I want us to help people right now. Mm-hmm. Some steps in once they've identified that the person that they are in a relationship with, either in a romantic sexual relationship, mm-hmm. or they find that they're married. Many people find that they're married to mm-hmm. a narcissist. What would you say are some things that they can do or need to do immediately in order to get out? And we're not even going to touch on the subject of divorce yet, but just to get out from that relationship and not become the fuel of the narcissist that they're with.
Okay. I created what's known as the first golden rule of freedom, which is once you know, you go. You get out and you stay out. Go so. That's what it's called. When you're told that this individual is a narcissist, or when you've worked it out that they are a narcissist, that's it. You must extract yourself from anything to do with that person across all spheres. And often people will say, well, it's easy to say, harder to do. True. But if you want to stay away from the person that is abusing you in whatever form it takes, then you have to implement no contact. That means you do not spend time with this person physically present with them. You don't talk to them on the telephone. You don't text message them. You don't social media message them. You don't go and look on that person's social media profiles to find out what they're doing. You ensure that they cannot access yours and post on them. You ensure that if this individual approaches your friends and family, you tell your friends and family, I don't want you to have anything to do with them. And if he or she says, can you pass a message on? You don't do it. Don't even come and say, they've been in touch with me. I don't want to know. Do not sit around reminiscing about what's happened about this individual. You will, because of the golden period that we provide you with, have experienced a fantastic time, but it wasn't genuine. It was a honey trap designed to draw you in and to ensnare you. And all of those photos, the GIFs, the videos, the emails, the poetry, the ballad that was sung to you when you stood on the balcony of your flat, all of that, you have to strike it from the record, burn it, delete it, exorcise it. And I set out how to do that in my book, Exorcism, which describes you how you must go through that purge. You have to ensure that every conduit between you and the narcissist is removed and a brick wall is built there. What makes it so hard is you have been engaging repeatedly with the narcissist up to this point. Your emotional thinking will be sky high. Your emotional thinking doesn't want you to get out. Logic says this person is a narcissist. That means they will continue to be abusive towards you. They will not change. And for the vast majority of narcissists, they don't know what they are. Therefore, there is nothing you can do to help or change this individual. They will not be made to see what they are. They will not change. Anything they say about having insight, you're being manipulated further. Anything they say about, but I can change, give me a chance, you're being manipulated. What's very difficult, of course, is when people's emotional thinking is that high, it obscures what they're hearing and makes them think that it's my mother. I can't go no contact with my mother because she's my mother. Wrong. She only has that label because she gave birth to you. She's not earned it by operating in a maternal way towards you. She is a narcissist. Remove the word mother and put narcissist there instead. I have to work with this guy. No, you don't. You can go and get another job. Why should I go and get another job? Because you want to get away from the narcissist. If you want to lose weight, you eat less and you exercise more. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't sit there and take no action. You have to do something. Now, of course, certain instances of getting into this position of walking away from the narcissist are indeed easier than others. If you've got children with a narcissist, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And I've set out an assistance package about how to co-parent with a narcissist, which will help people. I also set out in terms of dealing with the divorce process and what to do. There are lots of ways that you can actually get away from the narcissist. And if you absolutely cannot, and it's a very high standard that I put to this, if you absolutely cannot, there are ways of ameliorating the effect, reducing the interaction with the individuals, putting in place gatekeepers, not going to certain places. It's interesting. I ran a poll on my blog recently, Christine, which was all about asking people, how were you engaged with following the imposition of no contact? The top answer, I received a text message. You did not put no contact in place if the narcissist can text message you. The problem is, so many people are conned by their emotional thinking into not imposing no contact because they think they can work it out, or they think that they have to keep in contact. They think, if I keep open my phone to him, that means he won't come round and see me. No, that's emotional thinking. If, for example, the individual says, I don't want a romantic relationship with this person anymore, but I want to be friends. No, that's emotional thinking. Anything that causes you to continue the engagement with the narcissist is emotional thinking. Will you have to make sacrifices? Yes, you will. And some are bigger than others. But that's what you have to do. Because if you continue to engage with us, we win. And if you think to yourself, oh, I've read everything that you've written, HG. I've got this under control. I can handle him. I can handle the narcissist. No, you can't. That's emotional thinking. If you think, well, I can go grey rock with him and not give him any fuel. No, grey rock doesn't work. And that's the principle, in case people aren't familiar with it, of reducing your interaction when you're with the narcissist so you don't provide fuel. Fuel is my concept for your emotional output, which is what we feed on. So if you think to yourself, I need to go around and tell everybody what a douchebag this individual is, no, you don't, because you're continuing to engage. If you think to yourself, I'm going to take the narcissist down and ruin him, no, because you're continuing to engage.
Yes,
if
right.
you continue to engage with the narcissist, you are going to impale yourself on what I call the devil's pitchfork. And you will have at least one, possibly three downsides. The first is, you will give us fuel. If you come round shouting the odds at the narcissist and tell him what a P of S he is, and what a douchebag he is, and what an arsehole he's been, you're giving us fuel. It doesn't matter that you're angry. It doesn't matter that you're insulting us. You're giving us negative fuel. We'll lap it up. Love us, hate us, but never ignore us. So you'll be giving us fuel, and we are winning. If you engage with us, you run the risk of an adverse reaction. So if you come to talk to the narcissist and he tells you where to go, you get angry or upset. He might hit you. He might take something from you. If you are sat dwelling on the narcissist, you make yourself angry or upset or sad. So there's a downside, because that's a form of interaction. Too many people think no contact means not spending time with the narcissist and not ringing him up. It's way wider than that. No contact means, one, you don't spend time with the narcissist physically. Number two is no communications with the narcissist. So don't telephone the narcissist. Don't allow the narcissist to telephone you. No text messaging, no emails, no social media messaging. Number three, don't do things for the narcissist. So don't go round collecting things for the narcissist. Don't take him his dry cleaning. And don't do things occasioned by the narcissist, which means don't be stalking the narcissist's Facebook profile. 4, don't spend your time talking to people about the narcissist. If you do that, you are unlikely to get the answers that you need from those people. Yes, in the immediate aftermath, you need a bit of emotional support. That's fair enough. But if you keep doing it, you're engaging. Stop it. Don't talk with your family, your friends, the police, the school teachers, whoever it may be. Talk to me about it because there's a benefit from doing so. But talking to people who don't understand the subject, that's not going to help you. And 5, don't spend time thinking about the narcissist. Of course, that's hard to do, and there are ways around that. But those 5 fingers of engagement, as I call them, you've got to stop them, because all of them will cause you to be impaled on the devil's pitchfork. Some of them will mean you'll give us fuel. Some of them will mean that you will get an adverse reaction. But all of them drive up your emotional thinking. If you engage with us in any of those 5 ways, you cause your emotional thinking to rise. What does that mean? You will not listen to logic. You will not obey that first golden rule of freedom. You will keep engaging with the narcissist, trying to sort things out, or win, or to get him back. Or you will say, well, he's gone off with her. What if she makes him happy? Or what if she gets all the good stuff? I want him back. This person is a narcissist. Cut out all of those 5 forms of engagement, and I'll show you how to do it.
And the importance of getting out is we cannot I underscore that how important that is, because I think for most people, HG, and being a victim of a narcissist, I think that they have a real hard time. Number one, thinking like, who would do that? Because there is a love bomb phase. You know, we're talking, of course, about the horrific things that narcissists do to get their fuel. You are emotional fuel, and we haven't gotten into triangulation and all of that. But there is this honeymoon phase, this love bombing, right, where a normal individual all of a sudden has someone who says, "Oh my gosh, you're my twin heart, you're my soulmate. I've never felt this way before." Letters, love poems, the sexual connection that all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person thinks that I'm the best thing since sliced bread. And so never, if you're an empath or not, we never think that someone would do this on purpose who is not truly feeling those emotions, because what kind of creature would do that? Well,
exactly.
Right?
And what's happening is, of course, the empath is imposing their worldview on the behavior of the narcissist.
Right.
People have to understand that we look at the world completely differently to you. And understandably, you think that people operate to the same similar standards of behavior, moral framework, and general behaviors as you do. Variations on a theme, of course, but largely you think people will behave in a similar way. So you think, what kind of person would make all these declarations of love and then suddenly stop talking to me? Who the hell does that? Answer, exactly. A narcissist. But because the victim thinks, I wouldn't behave that way, they don't expect anybody else to behave that way. But here's the news. We do behave that way. And there are many millions of us. And you invariably, because you've been so invested in that relationship, rather than think to yourself, this person told me that I was absolutely wonderful and now has stopped speaking to me. They clearly don't think that I'm that wonderful, do they? Otherwise, they wouldn't behave this way. That's logic. And then you go to the next stage, which would be, that must mean that if they can't maintain this behavior with me, what they showed me was false. Therefore, I've been duped by this individual. I don't like that. I'm staying away from them. That's the logical response. You don't even have to use the word narcissist there. You can just identify that if somebody's behaved like that towards you and then has stopped, that is not good behavior. That is not healthy behavior. Therefore, you don't need to be with that person. But of course, empaths don't. Because what happens? Why has he stopped being like that? I want that back. What's going on? Has he met somebody else? Have I done something wrong? And of course, because of that addiction, the emotional thinking will kick in. Because all your emotional thinking wants you to do is engage with the narcissist. It is not interested in your physical well-being, your mental health, your sexual health, the state of your bank balance. It wants you to get your fix of narcissist, and it will do whatever it can to keep you in the game with us. So it will say to you, well, maybe he's done this because you were a little bit off with him last time you had a date. And then, oh yeah, that sounds kind of sensible, doesn't it? Actually, that gives me a peg to hang this behavior on. That must be it. I know. I'll ring him up and say, I'm really sorry. Was I a bit off with you last time we had the date? Mm-hmm. And of course, the narcissist is busy with somebody else. The reason he's not contacted you is you've been put on the shelf for the time being. And he's just not bothering with you because he's chasing somebody else. If this isn't, say, in the early stages of what's going on. And of course, you can't get hold of the narcissist. Rather than think, okay, I can't get hold of him. Well, I'm not going to waste my time and energy on this individual any longer because I know my value. No, the empath. But why all of a sudden can I not get hold of him? Maybe he's had an accident, or I must have done something wrong. What have I done to offend him? Or what's going on here? Why is he not talking to me? I need to speak to him and get that answer. And of course, what happens is you then manage to get in touch with the narcissist because the narcissist allows that to happen. And you then have the conversation asking what's going on. And you will be given something which is plausible. Sometimes it does stretch the imagination dependent upon the school of narcissists you're dealing with. But more usually, you're given something which has plausibility to it. And rather than examine it and cross-examine it and drill down and put it to proof, empaths more or less accept it at face value. Sorry, I didn't get in touch. I was in an area which had no signal. Oh, right, okay. And then later on, they go back and they look, but hang on a second, I can see that on WhatsApp, the messages were received and read. So he's just lied to me. Rather than then go, I've just been lied to, I shouldn't have anything to do with this individual any longer. He's lied to me. I need to find out why he's lying. You go back in. And every time that you come back, whether it's to tell us that you love us, whether it's because you want things to work, whether it's you want to try and get to the truth of what's going on, all of these things, all you're doing is walking back onto our battlefield, and we will always win because we play by our rules, which change moment to moment, and you, when you're ensnared, don't know what those rules are going to be. And the only way you win this battle is by not fighting it. You don't enter onto the battlefield. But empaths are terrible at avoiding doing that because their emotional thinking is so strong, they lose insight. And you have a window of evasion during which you can either get out or avoid being sucked back in. But then that window will close Why? Because the more you engage, the more your emotional thinking increases, and you get dragged onto the narcissist wheel of misery, which I've written about recently on my blog. And what happens? Your emotional thinking goes up. It makes you engage more with the narcissist. What then happens? Your emotional thinking goes higher. You engage more with the narcissist. And round it goes. And you get drawn back in. And it'd be lots of different ways that you will get drawn back in. And empaths are highly susceptible to this. And therefore, it's a mission. When you realize that you've been ensnared with a narcissist, you don't allow your emotional thinking to go, what if he's not a narcissist? He is. You've been told that he is. Oh, but these behaviors don't quite fit. That's because of the different types of narcissists. If you're unsure, consult with me and I'll put it beyond any doubt for you. Then, well, what if he can change? He said that he could. No, that's a lie. Well, what about, I feel guilty for leaving him? Well, you do, because you're an empath. But you need to push that guilt down. And the more you stay away from the narcissist, your emotional thinking will start to give up, and it gets easier and easier. It is hard. There's no denying it. It's like coming off a drug. If you're a drug addict and you want to stop taking a drug, it can be a slow, hard, painful, boring route. And there are two ways to make the pain go away. You can take the long, winding road of conquering the addiction to a manageable level and staying away from the very thing that's harming you, or you can take more of it. That makes the pain go away temporarily, only for it to return. And that's what people do because of that addiction to the narcissist. And we are similarly addicted. We're addicted to fuel. And so that's why it's a symbiotic relationship. The point is, recognize that you've been ensnared by a narcissist, recognize that you've got an addiction. That addiction will never leave you, but it's certainly manageable. And it's manageable by the application of logic, which means stay away from the narcissist in all of those 5 forms that I've explained.
Very, very important words there that you said, especially just to stay away from the narcissist, which I know can be difficult for people, especially because of now you had mentioned fuel.
Yes.
And from my understanding and experience, the more emotionally charged someone is, if they're an empath or not, but if they're in a relationship with a narcissist, the more emotional communication. Hey, how come, are you seeing someone else? Someone said that they've been, that they went out with you, or how come you're ignoring me? Why would you ignore me? All of those things. That is the emotional fuel that narcissists live on, right? I mean, it's literally, and I had given the example earlier about it being an energetic vampire. Let's talk about this fuel and how important it is for the narcissist.
Fuel and control are fundamental to us. Fuel is your emotional output. So if you smile at me, you've given me fuel. If you make me a cup of tea, that's a kind gesture. You've just given me fuel. If you shout at me and call me an utter bastard, you've given me fuel. If you ooh and ah and say, ooh, that's great, during sex, you've given fuel. You buy the narcissist's birthday present, you've given fuel. If you're crying in front of him because of something he's done, you've given fuel. Any emotional response, gesture, words, tone, body language, facial expression that is occasioned by our actions is fuel. So if I put something on Facebook that's nasty about an appliance and they ring me up saying, why have you done that? That's fuel, because their upset was caused by me. If that person calls me and goes, my dad's been really horrible to me, boo-hoo, boo-hoo, that's not fuel. I didn't cause it. I'm not interested. It's redundant. That's the fuel for your father. He may not be a narcissist, but that's not fuel for me. Your emotional output wasn't occasioned by me. So in such an instance, what the narcissist would do there, because we don't have emotional empathy, we have cognitive empathy, we can fake it, but not all narcissists can do that. It might be that it serves our interests to say, oh, I'm really sorry that your father's been like that. And you go, oh, thank you, HG. You're so kind and considerate. That's fuel for me because my kind words cause that reaction. Or that individual might be painted black and I'm not even bothered to give them any cognitive empathy. And I might turn around and say to them, well, I'm not surprised your dad called you that. You are lazy and useless. and they go, boo-hoo, you're being really horrible to me. That's fuel for me. I occasioned it. So fuel manifests in lots of different ways. There's positive fuel, which are the positive emotions, happiness, joy, love, delight. Negative emotions, anger, frustration, irritation, hurt, upset, tears. We want both. And negative fuel is more powerful than positive fuel because it's harder to obtain. Within fuel, there are three aspects to it: potency, frequency, and amount. Potency is based upon your position in the fuel matrix. So if you are what I call the intimate partner primary source, let's say husband or wife, very potent. If you're the guy in the kiosk selling newspapers and you're a stranger to me, you're a tertiary source. And there's primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. And I go into all of that in detail in the book Fuel. People can read about that there rather than me go into detail now. And so that's your potency. Then there's frequency. So if you send me one text message, that's a one-off hit. If you send me lots of text messages, I'm getting frequent fuel over the course of those messages. If we're in bed together and having sex for an hour, I'm getting fuel all through that hour. The amount, that depends upon the method of delivery. The largest amount of fuel that you give to us is in person. Why? Because there's all these different strands. If you're stood in front of me, shouting at me and calling me all of the names under the sun, the language that you're using is negative, that's fuel. The tone of your language is negative, that's fuel. Your facial expression is negative, that's fuel. The look in your eyes is hatred, it's negative, that's fuel. And your body language, you're waving your arms around, you're clenching your fists, it's negative. And so even if you tried not to use a particular tone with me and tried to keep your arms still and try to govern your facial expressions, the fact that you're still calling me bad words, you're still giving me fuel, and the look in your eye, you can't control that. And what normally happens is you have an emotional response before you can think about it and rein it in. So even if you try to limit your interaction, and this goes back to why I say grey rock doesn't work, your mouth will twist, you will frown before you can try and combat that. You will instinctively wave your arms around before you can bring them under control. Your voice will go up with the tone of annoyance before you can bring it under control. And so all of those strands contribute to provide us with a massive amount of fuel. If you send me a text message, it's the written word, and all that's in there is the tone of what you have written. So if you put, "Dear HG, I think you're a complete dickhead," calling me a dickhead gives me a bit of negative fuel. If you just put, "Dear HG, I don't want to be with you anymore," there's no fuel there, and that would wound me. And it's an important distinction to make that when you have an interaction with a narcissist, you only have one of three types of interaction. The first is the provision of pure fuel, saying, "I love you," pure positive fuel, or "I hate you," pure negative fuel. The second interaction is wounding. Many people get this wrong. They think if they tear a strip off the narcissist, they've wounded the narcissist. They have not. If you ignore me, you wound me. If you forget my birthday, you wound me. If you don't pick up the phone when I call you, you wound me. If you don't call me back, you wound me. If you don't reply to my text message within 2 seconds, you wound me. And the variance of the wounding depends upon the proximity of interaction. You ignore me in person, massive wounding. You fail to respond to my text message, minor wounding. The third interaction, and this is the one that many people don't know about, is challenge fuel. Let's go back to the example of tearing a strip off the narcissist. If someone is shouting at the narcissist and saying he's a useless good for nothing, the anger, etc., is fuel, so that can't wound. But you're challenging the narcissist. Why? Because you're suggesting that he's something bad, that he's not as good as he is. Therefore, you challenge his grandiosity, his sense of entitlement. You might be saying to him, "Where the hell have you been? You said you'd be here at 8 p.m. for dinner, and now you've turned up at 2 a.m. in the morning, stinking of cheap perfume, booze, and you've got lipstick on your collar." You're trying to make the narcissist accountable. You're not allowed to do that. And as a consequence, you are challenging us. And it's like a little rebellion, and we have to put that down. If you give us pure fuel, there's no problem. We're in control. We're getting fuel. Everything's rosy in the garden of the narcissist. If you wound us, you are threatening our control, and you're not giving us fuel, and you've wounded us. Problem. And this will ignite the fury of the narcissist, prompting a visceral reaction to get you to respond. Challenge fuel. You're giving us fuel, no problem, but your challenge threatens our control. We have to be in control of our environments at all times. Now, and then now, and then now. It's by microsecond to microsecond. And fuel is required because it tells us that we're in control of the situation. And it validates us. It makes us feel powerful. You don't give us fuel, we are made to feel weak. We are made to feel powerless. And we hate it.
And the disconnection that if you are someone who is surviving or has survived a narcissistic relationship, the very act of completely disconnecting, as you had mentioned earlier, wiping them off, blocking them on your social media, having zero contact with them, basically wiping them out of your life and your brain and your heart. When you do that, when you pull that plug, literally, and there is no electricity between the two of you, then they've already gone on and seeked other fuel. But then they will not be getting that fuel. They'll not be getting that energy. So then they are forced to go elsewhere. Correct?
Well,
yeah.
Ultimately, yes. In the first instance, of course, because our mindset is you belong to us.
Yes.
Okay? And that mindset remains until either we die or you die. But you belong to us. And therefore, if you have the audacity to try and escape us by no contact, if you, for example, are our primary source, you create a huge hole in our fuel matrix. And the easiest way to repair that is get you back in. So we will fight through what I call the initial Grand Hoover to draw you back in again. Now, if you have moved across the country, changed your telephone number, come off social media, your family and friends don't know where you are, we just cannot get in touch with you. And therefore, we can't hoover you because it's impossible for us to have a conduit towards you. The problem that most people have with no contact is they will say, it's so hard, he keeps hoovering me. The reason is your no contact isn't good enough. If you make it so solid, we just can't hoover you because we can't get through. I accept that sometimes it's very difficult to move elsewhere. However, brilliant as we are, we've not yet mastered the art of walking through doors and walls. If we turn up at your house, don't answer the door. The problem is you do. Go away, leave me alone. You've just given us fuel. Your emotional thinking spikes. You get drawn into an argument with us. Right. Or you shout through the window. Or you talk through the letterbox. Don't do it. Don't answer the door. Eventually, the narcissist will have to retreat because he's being wounded by you not answering the door, and he has to go elsewhere. So when you first escape, the narcissist, if he or she can, will hoover you and hoover you hard. But if you put in place a solid no contact, we just can't do it. Therefore, we are forced to go elsewhere. It's similar to, imagine you're driving your car and it's low on gas. You pull up at a gas station. It's closed and there's nothing advertising when it's going to open. You can't park by the gas station because you're on a busy road and you're going to have to keep driving around the block. Do you keep driving around the block, wondering and waiting when it might open on the off chance that it will, in order to put some fuel into your tank, which is dangerously low? Or do you go somewhere else where you know that it's highly likely, or you know for a certainty that you can get fuel? You'll go somewhere else. So if you make it impossible for the narcissist to get fuel from you, the narcissist has to go somewhere else. If you make it very difficult for the narcissist, that most narcissists will go and choose the low-hanging fruit. Imagine you've got a tube of toothpaste. If it's full, it just takes a little bit of effort to squeeze that toothpaste out onto your toothbrush and away you go. If there's hardly any left, you've got to squeeze it from the rear and push it all the way forward. And in the scheme of things, it's not a massive amount of effort, but comparative to just giving it a gentle squeeze, relatively, it's a huge amount of effort. What do you go and do? You go and buy a new tube of toothpaste instead. We're just the same. If you make it impossible or very hard for us to hoover you, all but the most determined of narcissists will go elsewhere. And when I say the most determined of narcissists, I mean the greater, and we are extremely rare. Most people will have been ensnared by a lesser or mid-range narcissist. You build those defenses, you will force the narcissist to go elsewhere. But the main reason why you keep getting hoovered is because people don't impose no contact properly. And it's understandable. Why? Because they don't understand the concepts, because there's too much misinformation out there, or information that does not go far enough, and they're affected by their emotional thinking, which cons them into concepts such as, As I mentioned earlier on, she's my mother, I can't go, no contact. Rubbish, you can do it. Might be difficult, you can do it. Or we can still be friends. No, that's emotional thinking. Or, well, we need to be able to sit together and show the world as a civil appearance for other people. No, you don't. You have to do what's right for you. You can't control us, no matter what you think. And if you think that you can, that's your emotional thinking working once again. You obey that simple, I made it very simple, and it's the litmus test against which all your interactions have to be tested against. Am I thinking of doing something that will cause me to engage in the 5 ways that I mentioned earlier? If you are, you must not do it. And your emotional thinking is making you think that that's sensible. If you do those things, your emotional thinking has made you do it. Once you know, you go, you get out, and you stay out.
Once you know, you go. And even when you go, there will be another tactic that the narcissist does that I am aware of, is when you have no contact, and they will also just to get trying to get any fuel at all, any remaining little drips and drabs, they will talk to others about you. They will tell lies about you. They will say that you are the devil incarnate and you're crazy. And oh my gosh, this person was doing all of these things, again, to seek other fuel, from other people who are lending them their ear.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Oh my goodness, you poor thing, right?
That's right. That's right. So the narcissists will go and get fuel from those other people, but also those are hoovers by proxy. Because
flying monkeys? So they call them the flying monkeys, yeah? Well,
indeed, I don't like that term. I use lieutenants or coterie, and it's usually a coterie. The narcissist was saying that he really loves you, and it's terrible. He realizes that he's made a massive mistake. And what does that do? It's interaction with the narcissist, not direct, but you're talking about the narcissist. Those people, your emotional thinking will start to rise. And salami slice by salami slice, it gets you to a tipping point and you think, well, okay, I'll sit down and talk with him. I'll give you an example of how emotional thinking salami slices, okay? You've got no contact, and it's been made easier because the narcissist disengaged from you and has gone off with somebody else. It hurts, but it means the narcissist is interested in them, not you. And you made attempts to ring the narcissist and text message the narcissist. He didn't want to know. You were persona non grata. And eventually you gave up. 8 months has gone by and you've not seen the narcissist. Okay. And you've not talked with the narcissist. Yes, you fall into the trap of maybe doing a bit of Facebook stalking and looking at pictures. So your emotional thinking is at a moderate level. But there's been no face-to-face interaction, no text messaging, no telephone. And you think you're doing okay. And it gets to Christmas time. Christmas arrives, and you suddenly think to yourself, I wonder what the narcissist is doing. Immediately, your emotional thinking wakes up. She's thinking about the narcissist. Let's keep this going. I wonder what he's doing. I wonder if he's still with her. I wonder if he's treated her the same way as he did with me last Christmas, which was really wonderful. And you start the thinking. You start thinking. And then your emotional thinking, it rises. And as a consequence, you then think, well, I'm feeling a bit miserable now. I'm going to ring my friend. So you ring your friend and you say, oh, hi, Tricia. I'm feeling really down. It's just come back to me. I don't know where it's come from. I'm hard hit. I guess it's because it's Christmas. Oh, yeah, I feel really sorry for you. I still don't understand what he did. I thought he was the one. So did I. And this well-meaning friend enables you to talk about the narcissist. The emotional thinking is rising all the more. And you're getting towards the dangerous tipping point. And all of a sudden, your resolve has become weakened because of your emotional thinking. And when you're in it, you may be listening to this thing, oh, I'll never go there. I'll never go back to that. Well, oddly enough, it happens repeatedly because I see it written about all over my blog and I hear it when I consult with people because that's what emotional thinking does. It slices away and it gets you from thinking and then moves you onto the talking. And then what do? You think, I'll just see what he's up to. And you go on his Facebook profile. And now you're doing the third thing, something occasioned by the narcissist. And you see that there aren't any posts about the new lady anymore. Interesting. Maybe they're not together. So you think about it all the more. And then you decide to send him a text message. Hi, how are you doing? Merry Christmas. Bing, your phone goes. He's replied, "Hi, great to hear from you. Merry Christmas." Text message. Number 2, you're engaging with the narcissist even more. Text fly backwards and forward, and they're nice. Of course they're nice. You're now painted white. The person who replaced you is in devaluation. And your text message was a Hoover trigger, and it was nice and easy for the narcissist to text you back because you've not blocked him. So text messages fly back and forth. All of a sudden he rings, and you hesitate. Logic is still trying to hang in there by its fingertips, saying, "Don't answer, this guy's a narcissist." But you give in. Emotional thinking's too strong. "Hello?" And the narcissist, "Hi, I thought I'd ring you. Rather than keep text messaging, one of this quicker. I just want to say I'm really sorry for the way that I've treated you. It was awful. And I've learned my lesson, and I've had a long time thinking about things. And I just want to say I'm sorry." Immediately, emotional thinking says, "Oh, wonderful. He's showing contrition. This is what the empath wants. Give him forgiveness. He's realized that he's done wrong. Excellent. I'm being proved right. My truth seeker trait is coming to the fore." And of course, all of this is going on unconsciously within the empath. And then the narcissist says, "Look, the least I could do is come and apologize to you face to face." Logic's still hanging in there. So you say, "Oh, I'm not really sure that's a good idea. Look, I only want 10 minutes," as the narcissist. So you agree. The narcissist comes round, 10 minutes becomes half an hour, drinks are poured, you make him dinner, you end up in bed together. The next day he says, "Well, I'll see you around." And you text him the following day, say, "It was great to see you again. I wonder when we can next meet up." No reply. You text him again, no reply. He's gone and done it again. And you think, how the hell did that happen? I was no contact, or pretty much close to no contact, and that had nothing to do with him. And he's drawn me back in again. Your emotional thinking did it. It started off small with you thinking, and it took you further and further and closer, and you lose insight. And I've seen it happen so many times. And that's why it's so important to ensure that you get that emotional thinking not down to a moderate level, but down to near zero. It's always going to be there slightly, but there's a whole range of techniques that I utilize to all of that. But the fundamental thing is, don't spend time with the narcissist. Don't text message the narcissist. Don't speak on the telephone to the narcissist. Don't spend your time doing things in and around the narcissist. Don't talk about narcissists with other people. Don't spend your time thinking about the narcissist. Yes, it's hard, but if you stop doing all of those things, you've got to put the effort in the same way. If you want to lose weight, you've got to get on that treadmill and avoid the donuts. Only you can do it. I'll give you the best tools that are available. You've got to wield them.
If you know, you must go. That is the thing that I am hoping that most people get from this. HG Tudor, it has been, again, an incredible hour with you. I want to let our listeners know, in addition to your website, narcsite.com, that's NARCSITE.com, they can find your work also on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram under the title Knowing the Narcissist, correct?
That's right, yes.
All right. Well, and I encourage folks to definitely check out the work that HG Tudor is doing and how many people that he is helping. Although, again, he is a narcissistic psychopath, he is helping quite a few people escape the snare of the narcissist. And thank you again, HG Tudor, for your time and for...
You're very welcome.
...being my guest this hour. And folks, I want to thank you for listening. Please make sure that you like and share this program as much as you can on your social media. Again, if you yourself are a victim of a narcissist, of course, it's important that you hear all 3 parts of this series. But also, I want you to share this because someone you may know could very well be also a victim of a narcissist. Until next time, I want to thank you so much. And as I always say, remember to think outside of that damn box. Bye for now.